Hello, Horror
Fanatics.
Fanatics. I'm Frank.
I'm Jenn, and we welcome you to our weekly podcast,
The Horror. Thank you for joining us as we dive deep into all things horror, supernatural, scary, and downright creepy.
If you like what you hear, rate, review us, or subscribe or follow to add us to your regular rotation of podcasts.
You can also submit any ideas, comments, and suggestions to our email address at oth@seriouslydecent.com. You can go to our website at ohthehorrorpodcast.com. You can connect to your favorite podcast platform. You can connect to our YouTube channel. You can connect to our Facebook group.
Yep.
You can connect to our other spots, Instagram and X, but that's it's pretty light. It's pretty light and bare. And here's a crazy idea. You can actually listen to the whole entire catalog right at ohthehorrorpodcast.com.
Good fries.
Yep.
One-stop shop for all your horror needs.
We try to make it a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the day AI can do social media posting, and then all my prayers are answered. I think it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming close. I think there's some providers that are tossing it around. There's some website like store providers that are doing it. And it should really kind of be a no-brainer for a podcast platform. Like that literally should be like the next thing they do. Because it's what everybody gripes about. It's like, oh, I got to publish out to all these platforms and blah, blah, blah. And it'd be cool to just have it all jacked in to the account, and then per episode just hit like send social media, and it'd tell you about the episode and all that stuff.
Do all the things.
All that stuff I'm doing manually for one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just spread the word out more, because not everybody's living on Facebook. Not everybody's living on, a certain
Instagram
platform or something
X.
like that. You know, it's all over the place. So
yeah.
But I think what people don't understand is just how much work it really is.
No.
Like I always, I have a love-hate, I'm not going to say love-hate relationship. I have a hate/respect relationship for content providers.
Yes.
The ones who are really, really good at it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that. They don't realize the production of it.
Yeah.
The amount of equipment, the resources, the staff, and of course they all didn't start like that. They all started once. I really am always amazed by the ones who just pull it off, that have like a phone on selfie and that's enough, or just like a camera in a room and they hang out and people just sit and watch the show. I have a respect for that, because it's just like, man, the amount of luck that takes place for that to happen is really in a category of its own.
Right. Yes.
And for the ones that are working very hard at it, that have like a big staff, a big production crew, all of that stuff, a social person and all of that stuff, and just working, grinding. And then to see someone like that, like I was watching some kid, he's in his room at his parents' house. His room's nothing special, doesn't have any of the lighting that others have. And he literally has his phone against like a book or something like that. And he does these videos, and he's followed by millions of people. I think it's awesome. I think it's so cool that somewhere, and he's not from America or something like that. I think he's from, I know I'm going to have it wrong, but somewhere like Thailand or something like that. It's some, I think that it's some area in, I think Asia or something like that, where, and I honestly don't know what he does, but I just saw like a setup and I was just like, man, I'm like, go get him, kid. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And, whether he's doing any kind of monetization or not, who knows? Because then that gets sticky too.
Yeah.
Especially with YouTube, because YouTube really is kind of the house wins kind of scenario. And you really got to be careful if you have any copyrighted content.
Right.
Because if you have that, then your monetization just gets tossed away. And, and honestly, that's why I don't really kind of pursue it, because we don't have enough traffic to make it an incentive type thing. And even if we did have enough traffic, how long are you going to be a thing? I tell people that all the time. People are like, I hear you guys are doing really good with it. And it's like, yeah, we are. We're doing very good at it, exceptionally well. But I also know the luck and grace we have on our hands with this, to where literally at any moment,
Yeah.
It could just stop.
It could stop, or it could blow up further.
It could blow up further.
The options are...
Yeah. But none of it is, me coming to you and saying, maybe we need to tell our employers to go.
No.
It's not even close to that, because we have that rock solid employment behind us.
Right.
That keeps everything going. And so this still stays a hobby. And then that's where it gets messy, because if you do get sponsors and you get things like that, now, there has to be that agreement of, can you still say what you want to say?
Yeah.
Because they were driven to you for a reason.
Right.
But it's funny when money gets into play, all of a sudden people get nervous.
Yeah.
And I always say that. I think this podcast will do good until one of us, AKA me, says something that goes too far and we're just done. And that's when I apologize to you and say, I'm sorry I ruined the podcast.
It was a good run.
It was a good run. We're on year 5. We pulled it off,
Yeah.
Who knows? But I think that's what makes podcasting cool, in a sense, at least the ones that do it off the hip like we do, where you hit record, you go to the end and you stop and you're done. And I think it brings that free-form conversation, because some of our best episodes, in my opinion, were the ones where we got off on a tangent somewhere and uncovered stuff, either about one of us or each other or somebody we observed, or and it just gets these things that organically would happen, but you couldn't replicate or try to
you
force.
Can't script that.
No, without a doubt. And it's amazing what works. There's some episodes I look and I'm like, wow, okay, that one soared. Didn't see that one coming, And then there's other ones that I think, man, that's probably going to be really good. And crickets, it's like, below the standard average seeing, and that's where you really can't call it. But
you go,
here we are on a popular topic, the unraveling of our episode 200. 200 episodes.
It's crazy.
I think it's awesome,
it's just...
And maybe this will be the one
crazy.
that ruins it all, that we could put the stamp on it and just say, we ended up on an even number. But of course, 200, we were thinking like, we got to do something special.
Big. Yeah.
We got to do something big. And so we kind of toss it around, because we were talking about this like 50, 80 episodes ago, which is close to a year, because we do them every week. And, we're like, at some point that's going to come, and we never thought about it. And then Word of Life Christian Church came up.
Yeah.
And I remember you bringing it up to me, and you were like, what about Word of Life Christian Church? And I was like, well, what did they do? And you're like, well.
Yeah. Well.
It
was a cult.
It was a cult.
Beat 2 boys and killed 1.
Well, yeah. Okay, we were going to unravel that later, but here it is. So but the interesting part is this place is in Chadwicks, New York, which was literally around the corner from where you lived the later part of years before we got together.
Yeah. It wasn't far
but it was
at all.
in the town area of like where you were, I'm going to say your family is kind of located, that area,
and the building itself was my junior high school.
Was your old junior high school, and you were the last class.
I think we were one of the last
class to leave out of the building because it went up to road to the
they built the middle school.
But yeah, you were one of the last classes, and then this church bought it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
so we're going to unpack this. We're going to try to stay...
Now, if you're like, wait, Word of Life, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Yes, you have.
It's true.
This is not that.
Yeah,
It turns out there's not only several Word of Life, there's also several Word of Life Christian churches.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Yeah. This is, it's definitely something I'm going to get into a further depth with, because it's lately, in my last few months of research of theology and just different types of organizations, this is something that really...
And if you've ever gone to Scroon Lake, you've definitely seen Word of Life
If
signs.
you've gone to Scroon Lake, New York, there's a lot of what we'll call vacation Bible schools or Bible camps up there, summer camps. And Word of Life is huge there. They're massive. Like, you'll see school buses with Word of Life on the side.
Yep.
And here's the thing, like I went up there for vacation Bible school for the Lutherans when I grew up, and then I got out of that at like age 13, maybe a little younger. But we went there, I went there, and it would be, I think, for like a week or two, I can't really remember exactly, but I never remembered like a bad time there. It was always nice. I didn't mind going. That was when the house was still happy, like before the divorce and all that stuff. And I say happy in quotes, but it's, it was a good experience there. Yeah. And it was kind of weird, and weird in a good way, because like I would hear about how church was for a lot of people. And it's like, well, I went to the summer camp this summer, and they're like, what'd you do? It's like, well, we played kickball and volleyball, and we went swimming in the lake and all that. And then in between, we had these little sessions of learning about either scripture or the Bible or Bible stories or, things of that nature. And what was kind of unique about it was young all the way up to like high school.
Right.
So that part of it was unique in its own right.
Now, were the older kids like counselors?
Yeah, it kind of had it kind of had the similarities of just like a traditional summer camp.
Right. Okay.
So just have that splashed in with
some God and Jesus.
Yeah. But it wasn't crazy, I mean, it wasn't nuts. Like there wasn't a part I'd look, and even back, like I had fond memories of that, fond memories of people that I haven't seen in ages, a long time. It was a really, really good experience to go through as part of my journey.
I'll be honest. We as Catholics never had a VBS, a Vacation Bible School, but I know the other denominations do, and they are. That is a big part of their summer, if you will. And I've never heard anyone have, anything bad to say about it.
Not many.
For parents, it gets the kids out of their hair, and for the kids, you're having fun. Sure, you listen to some Bible stories, but then you go off and you do things.
Yeah. And I mean, there was that kind of cheesy stuff where there'd be some songs. I've never really been a big fan of like Christian music, like my whole entire life. I just can't do it. Now the old stuff I love, the hymns and the, I can't get enough of that.
Right.
And, that type of stuff. But even when I was young and like that area through there and the Johnny, row your boat ashore, all that stuff. And it just, I didn't like it. I liked hard rock and, and this wasn't hard rock.
That was not your jam.
That wasn't heavy metal. And, this isn't Ozzy. And they're like, but, no, it was a good experience. And you also had parents there because they were chaperoning, obviously. And then that was the cool part was it was adults you knew because they were the ones that were going to your church, but then also they had other churches there. So you got to meet different people. And it was a good experience. However, some of these places go a different route altogether.
Yeah.
And I'd have to say, like, that's the thing with the church that I grew up with. It was around for a while. Word of Life was around for a while. These were established non-denominational like places. They weren't new like underground stuff. Like I said, that's pretty expensive to pull that off.
Yes.
I mean, you need to be pulling some good money and, and of course it's all not taxed, and there's that whole aspect of it. But, they had it for such a long time and everything was established. Like none of that was new when I went there. It was just there.
So I would say with this story, your first exposure, aside from when we were talking about when the building was up for sale and my brother-in-law was like, we should all pool our money and buy it. And we're like, dude, somebody died in there. And he's like, what?
That was the first time I heard of that.
And then it was the documentary. I think it was like a cult series.
And that wasn't too long ago.
No.
That was a couple years ago we watched that.
And
I mean, we were doing the podcast when we saw that.
And I was like, see, we could do this as a podcast episode. And then There's another People magazine has a
documentary, which we watched that recently.
We watched that recently.
Mm-hmm.
If you just want an overview, it's pretty good. It's not extremely accurate.
The first one we watched was a Hulu thing. And that was okay.
I tried to track it down, and I couldn't find it.
I found it.
But the book.
So the book, anyone who's remotely interested in this kind of stuff, honestly, just to support this author, because this author, Susan Ashline, this was her first book.
Yes.
Which was phenomenal.
And it's extremely detailed.
It's called Without a Prayer, The Death of Lucas Leonard and How One Church Became a Cult. We have it in hardcover. It's in like good size print. It's about 350 pages. I could not put this down. I literally read this basically in like 2 days.
It's extremely heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, because knowing the ending going in, you just see how all of the dominoes
just everything
are
unfolds,
lining up.
Yeah. I think what's tough about the book too, if you're from the central New York area, it's worth reading.
Definitely.
Because the people in the story will hit close to home to you.
Right.
You know that type of person.
Right.
You know this type of person. And I'm not just saying in central New York, but there's just a lot of location specific things that if you're from the Utica area or south of the Utica area, it's really going to hit home to you. Store names, street names, locations like libraries and all that type of stuff. And even just towards the end with the hospital that they were talking about, and just the police and how police were handling things, because they never handled anything like this before.
Right.
And it's a really, really good book. You could tell it's a labor of love, because the amount of detail that she goes into and saying basically that, you know, she got this from all of the evidence that the cops had and just the interviews. And then she went out and actually tried to speak to certain people.
She did.
She's, I think, from the Rochester area, at least, or when the book was published. She was from the Rochester area, which is not far. I'd say it's probably, you know, 3 hours. But excellent book. Again, it's Without a Prayer, Susan Ashline. That's probably, I'd say, that's the biggest source we're going off of for this story, in addition to the video stuff that we went through.
Yes.
And any kind of thumbing around on the internet. But if you want a one-stop shop that has a lot of detail, a lot of perspective in it, I definitely recommend Without a Prayer.
It's very good. She includes the trial details, snips.
There's photos.
She's got photos. She's got interviews with the police that investigated it.
Yeah.
Former church members that would be willing to talk to her.
No, like I said, it's a labor of love, and honestly, she deserves the money. Yeah. You know, buy the book. She deserves. We're not getting any kind of affiliate thing for it. I just, you know, I can't imagine, after reading the book, I couldn't imagine emotionally what she went through from saying, I'm going to do this as a story, to like getting on the other side of it and realizing, you know, and just going through all of that, you know, because a massive labor of love, you know, and just, she could have quit at any time. Yeah. And you know what? I wouldn't have held anything against her.
No, because it's
tough.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I mean, it's tough for me because I know the area.
Mm-hmm.
I know the people. And while I don't know these people specifically, I know
that type of person.
It's not even that. Like, I know that community. They talk about, they lived on that main drag in Clayville, right across from where the old fire department was.
Library down the road.
And I used to shop at the thrift store, the Sequoia Valley Friends and Neighbors. And that's where these kids, like, that was the only place they were allowed to go. That and the library.
Yeah,
And, I volunteered at the library.
And I think that's the point to bring out. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because this is for the person who lives in like a metro area or someone who lives in a very dense populated area. This is very rural.
Yes.
I'm not going to say like Farmville, you're rural, where your nearest neighbor is like 2 farms away or acres, but it's the outskirts of a farming community that is beginning to get into what you would call almost suburban, almost, but you're still very rural. And so, I mean, like Jen's mentioning, this is a street that's literally a half mile at best.
Yeah.
There's a handful of homes. Everyone knows everybody.
Correct.
And then the church where they end up, the school building that they end up buying, it's very much the same. There's one convenience store in the whole area, and they have gas there, and that's it.
They do have an ice cream store.
No, and there's an ice cream store, and there's a restaurant, like a pizzeria takeout, and a diner.
Yeah.
And that's it.
A bar.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that's it.
That's it.
There's nothing else. And there's like one street light that actually goes from red to green, and at night it goes from red to yellow like a flasher.
And I will say the street light isn't in Clayville where the Leonards live, or in Chadwick's. Where the church quotes is.
It's in between, basically.
Yeah.
And
the thriving metropolis is Sequoia.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring that up in the beginning because, like, this is small.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows everybody, and they know their business. They know everything.
Yeah.
And so when you're going to sit there and you're going to ask, how the hell did this happen? It's the greatest question in the world. And I have a very good theory and answer on it in the end. But
Look who knows so much.
Oh, I love this stuff. I love the psychology of it. I love all of it. It's sad, but
it is.
But it's just interesting how people can get to this. So
I'm going to be glad to not have the strange, nightmarish dreams that I've been having since reading that story.
Yeah, the first night was quite a bit. Second night,
and just for
but
clarity,
I mean, we were reading it for hours.
Yeah, it had literally nothing to do with the story itself. Like, it wasn't
but it's mind
players.
Games.
But it definitely
was. It is mind games. So
not cool, man.
So here we go. The Word of Life Christian Church. It's a Pentecostal sect. It was based in Chadwick's, New York. It gained national attention in 2015 due to basically its authoritarian leadership, violent practices, and this tragic death of this
Lucas Benjamin Leonard.
He's a young boy. I hate to say it. You know, I mean, he was a teenager.
He was just shy of his 20th birthday.
20th birthday, but you're going to realize he was young. Lucas Leonard during a church counseling session, quote unquote. So we're going to get into the church's origins, key events.
Now, I will say that it did start out pretty innocuously. Like, it was just a Bible study.
It started in the basement of someone's house.
Yeah.
So in 1984, it was established by Jerry Irwin.
Yeah, that's when Jerry took over. Initially, it was started, Pastor Reggie had he was in charge of the group in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And he was the previous pastor of Cherry Valley Assembly of God. And two of the church other pastors, Mark Russ and John Muchler, they had succeeded Pastor Reggie in Richfield Springs. Enter Jerry Irwin, who took over in 1984.
Yeah. So for those who don't follow religion or Christianity at all or anything like that, so what ends up happening is this here. If you're not going into like an institutionalized, I hate saying that word, but for now it's going to have to work, an institutional type of setting like Catholicism, where there's a lot of structure.
Yes.
There's a lot of procedures and process and things like that. And a lot of people don't like that. So they'll walk away from that, or they just are pushed away from it. Too many rules, too many this, too many that.
Too hard.
And so what happens a lot, especially in a Rust Belt area like out here, where you have every type of splinter of Christianity in a 50-mile radius, what you'll get a lot is people that do prayer groups.
Right.
This is really kind of the foundational core of people getting together, where there's not really a church, there's not a mass, there's not any of that stuff. What it is basically, how it really kind of starts is either a group of women or a group of men get together on weekends, and they just pray, and they'll share experiences that they're having, and they'll talk about Bible stories and things like that. They'll have either things that they've got that's organized material that they ordered somewhere and actually lead a prayer group like that, or they'll just get together out of just spontaneity.
Right.
And they grow.
Just for clarity, and for those who aren't familiar, Richfield Springs is a very smallish community. Again, there's some farms, but that's not what makes up the bulk of it.
Yeah.
It's one of the few places, I want to say one of the few bigger like towns before you hit like Cooperstown.
That's
would
generous.
be like the biggest.
Yeah, and even Cooperstown is small.
Yeah.
Everything around this place is small.
Yes.
Except Utica and New Hartford.
Correct.
Utica and New Hartford. So as we go through and we start rattling names, just assume there's small drive-through towns that have a graduating class of less than 50 people.
There was almost 100 in mine, but still.
Fine. Average 80. Okay, we could split in the middle there.
That's good.
Average 80. And then New Hartford is next to Utica, and Utica is Utica. It's an actual city, small city, but it
is still
it meets the
city.
Classification of a city. So in 1984, Jerry Irwin establishes this Word of Life Christian church, and he founded the church as an independent Pentecostal congregation. And what they were emphasizing on was strict biblical interpretation and spiritual purity. And over time, what ended up happening was they just started to get isolated. They would bring people in, and they would talk about just the strict biblical interpretation of stories. At this point,
do you have his timeline?
What?
Jerry's timeline before he takes over the church.
No, I didn't get that far into it because
I do.
All right, let's do it then.
Okay. So Jerry Dean Irwin was born in Erie, Pennsylvania on April 22nd, 1957. He was the son of Charles and Judith Ann Gardner Irwin. He had 3 sisters, and they were raised just outside of Erie, Pennsylvania, in a home built next to a cow pasture. I can relate. My house was next to a cow pasture. At 8 years old, Jerry would carry the buckets of cement and mortar that his father would use to set the blocks for the foundation for their home. Though not churchgoers, the parents sent the children to Sunday school at a Baptist church. At 11, he was listening to an evangelical guest speaker who asked if anyone wanted to receive Jesus as their savior. Having no idea what this meant, Jerry walked to the front of the church and kneeled, and the preacher laid hands on him and prayed, and Jerry claims from that moment on, he felt different. He recalled his childhood home as one of abuse, where he was called stupid and no good, and that he'd never amount to anything, and if anyone, say his grandfather, complimented on how well he was behaved, his mother would claim, quote, "That's because he knows I'll beat him if he acts up." His father would ridicule him, especially in groups of people. Anytime he could make Jerry feel less than or smaller, he was all about. Especially if he wasn't doing something correctly or not fast enough. He would reference this to a daughter that he never raised, by the way, years later in an email. He would just tell her all of the horrible things of his childhood. He claimed to be hit in fits of rage over and over, as opposed to a one-time spanking, which I guess to him would have been preferential. There was little encouragement and far less affection. He would relate his early childhood to his congregation as a knife stabbing his heart and ripping him open, only to callous over, leading him to hate his parents, rebelling against, and resenting them. At 16, Jerry was convinced a police informant. Now, I want to stop for a second because this is him at 16.
Mm-hmm.
He convinced himself that a police informant was setting him up for arrest.
Yeah.
So we got to be proactive. He smashes the guy's windows with a baseball bat and leaves town. He hitchhikes his way to Ohio, where a man tells him stories about the loads of money you can make working as a deckhand on fishing boats in Florida. So Jerry's like, I'm in. He claims to be 18, and he travels with the man down to Port Canaveral, where he was employed on a 65-foot scallop boat. 5 days a week, Jerry would leave the dock at sunup and unload just before midnight, and his weekends were spent getting drunk and doing drugs. This is the pastor, guys.
Yeah. Well,
Future
hey,
pastor.
Everybody has a past.
It was during one of his benders where he met Robin at the Pillow Talk Lounge in Cocoa Beach. 2 weeks later,
That's where my dad used to live.
he asked
Not
her,
in a Pillow Talk Lounge.
not at the Pillow Talk Lounge,
but in
in
Cocoa
Cocoa
Beach.
Beach.
Yeah.
He asked her to marry him, and everyone still believes him to be 18, by the way. He's 16.
Yeah.
Jerry rents a trailer near the port and switches to a swordfish vessel, which is headed to the North Atlantic. Robin joins him, and this kind of ends the honeymoon phase of their relationship. He would later claim to their daughter that something would come over Robin and she would become mean and hateful, like his parents. He felt she never encouraged him and was quick to put him down while in the company of others. They hitchhiked to his parents' house and then to Robin's hometown. Oh, but they get married in November of 1974.
Mm-hmm.
She's so horrible that they get married in November of 74.
It's a typical story.
Jerry joins the Air Force, and they settled at Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois. I may or may not have said that correctly. They decided to have a baby, and, as one does when you're in this hostile relationship. And oddly enough, tensions increase as he failed to meet her expectations. They relocate to Griffiths Air Force Base in Rome, New York in September 1975. And that's when his son Mark was born, that December. Their tensions mounted as Robin befriended the couple in the trailer a few lots away. Jerry was convinced they were speaking poorly of him, to which Robin suggested, all right, why don't you go out and find some friends of your own? Jerry felt friends deliberately interfered with family relations and caused trouble between spouses. He refused to make friends and wanted Robin to end her. So because he couldn't make or want friends, she can't have them either.
Yeah.
He would start college, but drop out. In 1977, Robin became pregnant with their second child. Oddly enough, they're still having problems. And
that's strange.
So they decided to seek counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Robin went to the base psychologist for help. Soon thereafter, Jerry was called in to join. He claims the psychologist commented on Robin's beauty throughout to elicit his jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
They would therapy shop, so they would go from therapist to therapist, but never got anywhere as a couple. He stopped talking her out of leaving, and then one day just drove them to the airport. And he said, leaving a brand in his memory of Mark's pained expression when Mark realized Jerry wouldn't be joining them. He was absent at his daughter Serena's birth. Robin took the children to Colorado, where her parents lived, so she would have a support system. And Jerry believed Robin was having his career counselor spy on him. I'm going to tell you right now, Robin could have given two shits.
Well, no, what it illustrates right here is the paranoia psychosis that this guy has. There's a real bad paranoia
100%.
issue, insecurities.
And because he was convinced that she was having his career counselor spy on him, now he's starting to get depressed, and he falls back into the life of bars and partying.
Mm-hmm.
And in May 1979, he was intent on ending this pain and suffering. And he was on the road walking to the destination with the intent of ending all of it. When, according to him, the road disappeared, he felt weightless and the sky became rose-colored. He saw God on his throne with Jesus at his side, and the presence of the Holy Spirit, much like the day he took the Lord as his savior. So the same feeling he had then, he has, and then this revelation would change his life. In 1980, Jerry went to Colorado to find his children. He ended up living with them in Robin's parents' home for a short time. I'm sure that wasn't at all awkward.
Could you imagine how awkward that would be?
I don't know what you're talking about.
My goodness.
That sounds
But I mean, I get it too. I mean, it's the kid's father, so you can't really deny that both ways,
Right.
but man, what an awkward scenario.
Yeah.
After he finds this epiphanal moment in his life.
So Robin, while he's staying there, she's like, yeah, no, I'm out. She takes the kids and leaves with another man. Serena would later write to Jerry with her mother's side of the story. Robin thought Jerry was insane. He would stare at her to make her upset, talk to demons, and paint weird things on their walls. Robin left to protect the children. Jerry's mother had once tied Mark to a tree while babysitting. When they moved to New York, Jerry got mean, she said. Her maternal grandparents, however, had always remarked that Jerry was really nice, gentle, and soft-spoken. But here's the thing. You're not going to generally show you're crazy to anyone other than the person you spend the most time with. Like, most of the time, they can hold their shit together for a little bit.
Now, this brings me into a thing I want to segue with, where this is where I have a problem with people saying, well, they just have mental problems, they have this or that. It's like, all right, somebody who has Tourette's that just says shit, cock, fuck in the middle of the supermarket,
right?
That's a mental problem.
Right.
But somebody who says they have Tourette's,
right,
and only says shit, cock, fuck in front of the family on Thanksgiving dinner,
yes,
but doesn't say it anywhere else, and having this ability to hold, I have a hard time going there.
Right.
So it's a poor analogy. Back to Jerry, anybody who's domineering, paranoid,
yes,
and all of this stuff, it's insecurity at the end of the day.
100%, yes.
And they just show it to one person or a group of people.
Yes.
That's the question you got to ask is why?
Right.
Why those people? And generally it falls into the category of acceptance. They let him do that.
Right.
And he knows they'll let that happen.
Yes.
So even if that's consciously or subconsciously, I'm comfortable around this person so I can be this.
Yes.
That's a thing. But not doing it in others, that's a choice.
Right.
You're making a choice to act like this. You find this very common with alcoholics.
Yes.
Alcoholics will try to hold their shit together for a certain amount of time.
And they can
and then
hold it together for a certain amount of time.
They try.
Yeah.
And then once that veil is lifted and the pressure valve can go, that's when the shit just starts hitting the fan all over the place. And I speak from experience. I was never that bad, but I had a family member that was bad. My mother, God rest her soul, a long period of just massive abusive drinking.
Yes.
And it just gets out of control.
My
There's a
ex-husband.
point where you have to take your hands off the situation and you're like, I can't do anything about this. This is literally...
You're not even a passenger.
You are a case of old, sensitive dynamite.
Yeah.
And that's how I've got to treat you now. I've got to walk gently around you. I've got to walk blah, blah, blah. But, son of a bitch, I'd watch her function at work and I'd watch her function around, if it was friends' parents that were coming. I'm like, wait a second. You can turn this on and off like a light switch.
Yep.
What the hell is really...
infuriating.
It's infuriating. And when you're
because you can, you're choosing not to.
Well, no, but that's when you realize it's restraint. It's opposite. You're not turning. This is what I learned as I got an adult. What she was doing was not turning it on or off. She was restraining what she already was. There's a big difference there.
Yeah.
So when that person would leave, let it all out. But there's this restraint.
Yep.
And I honestly, I'm sorry, it seems very demonic to me. I just, in
Yeah.
retrospect of looking back at things and knowing what I know now and knowing the things that I've experienced, it's very demonic. It's like you're trying to suppress something,
Because you
a
are.
thing, and
Yeah.
you are. And this is where I think, in my opinion, I was going to go a little further on the tour with this, but I think Jerry at this point was already at odds with some sort of demonic / activity with the mental imbalance,
Yeah.
just everything. There was something at work there, and his ability to hold it
Mm-hmm.
in certain areas, but it slips out of his grasp as he
Right.
goes
Yeah.
through the church and he
Yep.
gets into this. It just all of a sudden Jerry's out,
Yeah.
and in full bore. And then unfortunately, he was looked at and respected for being like that.
Yeah.
That's later on in the tour. We'll get there,
Yeah.
but that's my opinion on that. And I think it's a lot you see it with abuse victims,
Mm-hmm.
other abusers. You see it also with people with substance abuse. And like I said, I think it's trying to contain
Mm-hmm.
this entity,
Yes.
and they can only fight so long,
Right. So now
Yeah, no
now
kids.
it's
They're
1984.
all gone. Yeah,
Now Jerry meets a new woman.
yeah.
And I'm going to tell you why I had a problem with this story. Because Tracy,
Mhm.
the future Mrs.
Irwin,
Irwin,
yeah.
which I'm not even entirely sure. If I remember correctly in the book, like they get married and he still hasn't divorced his first wife. So then he's got to
Yeah.
divorce the first wife and then they reaffirm their
Yeah.
marriage. So Tracy was raised with her 2 younger sisters on a farm in Richfield Springs, where she worked hard, was up with the roosters, and then, do her
Mhm.
chores, head to school. She helped her mother with the animal birthing and doctoring, so the animal husbandry. She was gentle voiced, obedient, and a follower. She was book smart, a quick learner, voracious reader, but lacked common sense. She was teased for thinking there was a paint color called camouflage that came out of the can multicolored, just like camouflage.
I read that and I could not stop laughing because that literally just like with the paint of a brush tells you exactly
who she is.
what you're dealing
So
with.
now you get, this is the perfect woman for him.
Yeah.
She was teased. She was gullible, but her mother claimed she was the best kid in the world.
Mhm.
Their bond was tight, so tight that Tracy's sister was jealous of the mother
2,
and daughter's relationship. The middle daughter shared her bedroom with Tracy and considered Tracy to be her best friend. Tracy was a devoted Christian, active in church and school, where she played sports and clarinet in the band. She had a close group of girlfriends, and she was popular with the boys. Diane, Tracy's mother, took her to Sharon Springs to help her deliver a Jersey cow, for which they would get a horse in return. A guy Diane went to school with was there with Jerry. Jerry was 10 years older than Tracy, and they exchanged addresses. The two would become pen pals, getting to know each other through letters. In one letter, Jerry wrote Tracy that God told him she was going to be his wife, as one does after just meeting a high school girl.
Yeah.
2 months after meeting, they married. Tracy was 18. Jerry started his church on their wedding day. Jerry was cool to Tracy's family, who visited his church in Richfield Springs a couple of times. When Diane spoke to him, he would not make eye contact. He'd look down, away, next to, or anywhere but at her.
Mhm.
She also noticed he only did that with her, not with anybody else. Jerry told Tracy her middle sister, the one who considered Tracy her best friend, was a bad influence because she watched TV. Neither attended her high school graduation in 1986. Tracy was interested in connecting with family, though. Jerry's estranged family, not her own.
Yeah.
Tracy and her children would spend a decade searching for Jerry's children, Serena and Mark. And when they found them on a reunion website, it took a lot of convincing to get Jerry to reach out to them. He was upset that they had not only found them, but wanted him to reconnect with them.
I know. Can we just unpack that for a minute?
Yeah.
Here's this woman who's so curious about this guy's life.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's not being transparent about it.
No.
He's not being, I'm not going to say transparent, but forthcoming about it. And, you know, so much to do the diligence on checking all this out. Finds them.
Yeah.
And he's still like, I don't want to do this. That's your own kids, you know, and yet he's married and probably talking about how he wants to have a family with this person.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm reading that in the book and I'm just shaking my head like, again, warning signs, if you really are open to them, are there. But when you have the blinders on.
Tracy and Jerry's kids would actually exchange letters, email, and photos with these kids.
Yeah.
And after months of pecking at Jerry, they convinced him to reach out, to which Mark and Serena chose not to reestablish a relationship with their biological father.
Yeah.
That should have been the first clue to Tracy.
Well, yeah, at least a cause of concern, you know, I mean, just like, you know, or reach out to him separately and be like, look, I want to talk to you separately. Like, I'm getting involved with this person. Like, what, you know, what's going on here? You know, and again, this is where I think someone like Jerry already has his hold on
100%
on somebody. And what amazed me in the story is how quick he was able to do that with people. But I have a general rule of this. For someone who's going to be a follower in life, you know, some people aren't just built for leading, you know, they're just not. And that's fine. But at some point you should lead.
Right.
You should lead. Get out of your comfort zone. Do something difficult. Lead.
Yes.
Be a leader so you understand that side of the fence and how you would treat somebody, how you'd want to treat somebody, how hard it is to lead.
Yes.
All of that. Because if you are just a blatant follower, you're really handicapping yourself because you're only going to be the best of who you're following.
Right.
That's a scary proposition to put yourself in.
So he meets Tracy in 1984. Within 2 weeks, has her convinced to marry him.
Yeah.
New Year's Day, 1986, Tracy would give birth to their daughter, Tiffany. And right after Tiffany's birth, they cut off Tracy's side of her family, which is why they end up not going to the sister's graduation. But I mean, Tracy she grew up in a strong family unit. Like, they were all so close. And the fact that she just turned her back on them, that is one of the key things in an abusive relationship, is when they isolate you, especially from your family, your friends, your loved ones. And then that person becomes it.
Well,
that's
and
all that you have.
And here you have that type of abuse, but also at this point, he's doing this church.
Yes.
And, you know, this is founded at this time. They're doing it at the basement.
In their home,
In their home. And he's basically saying at this point to everybody that he has this commune with God. He speaks to God directly, speaks to Jesus directly, and now becomes this authority figure to people that he's pastoring for, you know, or shepherding, as we'll say. I'll say it for the rest of the term here, you know. So he's shepherding this flock, and he's basically saying he's the intermediary between them and God.
Right.
So anything that they're looking to do or try to do, let me turn on my God gene, you know, and do this bit where none of that's happening. It's just Jerry,
right?
You know, under the influence, quote unquote, of what he thinks is talking to God, because he's got some psychopathic behavior going on. That's
he really does. And he also has a very Old Testament approach to relationships.
Yeah.
Like, wives need to be submissive to their husbands.
Yeah.
And that was his problem with Tracy's mother.
And that's probably how he's raised.
Actually doing things.
And that's how he was raised, I mean, that's, unfortunately, I think people do have to understand this. Like, if you're going to have kids, it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. And,
right. Yeah.
And you're going to screw up, all the time doing it. But, like, I remember telling this guy that I used to work with, and I was like, look, man, I was like, I give you credit for it. I'm like, I don't want to have kids. And a lot of it is for reasons that I grew up, like now I'd say being older, and I think I'm too old to have kids. But if I had this mentality when I was younger, I'd be a little more receptive and open to having kids. But I just remember telling somebody, it's like, I didn't come from a polished place. I didn't come from, I don't
what
have
I got to offer.
I got a lot worse to offer than better, and everybody, oh, you'd be really good at it. And it's like, yeah, but that's a roll of the dice, man, because at some point, your kids are going to look at you not as I'll speak at my direction. At some point, a kid's not going to look at me as a parent anymore. They're going to look at me as Frank.
Yeah.
The man.
Yeah.
There's that moment.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I learned my dad, the man, versus my dad, the father.
Yeah.
Two totally different people. I had two totally different opinions about it, you know. And even now I look back and it's like, my dad will say, well, he was raised in a real bad environment.
Right.
And then there's a part of me that's like, well, didn't you want to just break that? Didn't you want to be the one to break that cycle? But then I realized it's tough because even me growing up, like I had just a terrible temper and I got that through. This is what we were talking about before, like where I believe in family curses.
Yes.
I don't think it's a spiritual curse. I think it's just sin that's handed down.
Right.
You know, all the way from original sin.
Yeah.
This is why I believe original sin.
Well, they say that you carry your ancestors in your DNA. Like, you still have that little bit of the hunter-gatherer in you.
Yeah.
Or you still have the little bit of that could be a saber-toothed cat, or it could be a squirrel.
It's something dangerous.
Right.
Yeah. No, those are
that you carry it.
Those
with
are
you.
in-ground things, but there's other things you're raised with that just like hanging out with your family. Like I can only go so far.
Yeah.
And like especially when you guys start complaining.
Right.
And I mean, you're going to complain. You're family, for Pete's sake.
Right.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's a point where you guys go and I literally have to get up and walk away from the table. It's like, I can't do this with you guys because what you're complaining, I wish was the best thing that ever freaking happened. I wish that was the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Because my Lord Jesus, that just, that wasn't the case. And then the thing is you start saying that to people, and that's when you realize that, wait a second. Because when you're a kid and you're growing up, you don't know any better.
No.
You think your house is like everyone else. You think this is what everybody's doing. And then there comes that awkward point when you're like, above like age 7, age 8, where you start hanging out at other parents' homes or other friends' homes without your parents there.
Yeah.
And you get to see their family as best as they're going to portray around you because everybody puts on a
show.
face, at least with kids. And you realize like, holy crap. And I remember like with my buddy Ray, I was like, my house is nothing like this. Like nothing. Like you guys are doing this way different than we are.
Yeah.
Everything on every conceptual level. And then you're like, holy crap. And then I visited another kid's house and it's like, okay, they're not like this either. And then you look and it's like, they're not, holy crap, we are different.
Yeah.
Very different. And then you don't know who to talk to. You don't know how to talk to people. I mean, like even like your siblings, there's conversations I just know I can't have with your siblings.
Right. Yeah.
They won't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
I've told your mom a couple of things of like things with my parents, and your mom and your dad at the time, God rest his soul, still alive, was like, I just don't even know what to say about that. And I'm like, well, you don't have to say anything. I'm an adult. I'm figuring it out. I'm on my own. I'm like, but they're like, yeah, but, and they're just stuck on but, you know, and it's tough. So I look at a Jerry that's coming up, and he's come from this real hard life, and it's hard. It's hard to work that crap out because some of it is just in you.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying DNA. It's just in your head.
He's carrying all of that. He's carrying all of his resentments from his parents.
And plus whatever he's mutated it into.
Exactly.
You know, because he's version 3 or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for him, the way he's approaching it is, all right, I want the opposite of what it was like in my house. But, I mean, he does fail his first 2 kids.
Yeah.
But it seems like he's pretty cool with...
Well, he ran away.
He did.
And, not ran away, ran and pushed them away.
He abandoned them.
No, exactly. Yeah. So that's another life. You know, basically, that's all that is. That's another life. That's, you know...
Right.
Like when you and I talk about high school, you know, it's just another life, you know. It's
different time, man.
Yeah.
Different time.
It's just, you know, and so now he's in this piece, but now the tough part is he's fueled by this commune with God.
Right.
You know, and feels he has this special relationship that no one else has.
He feels he is a prophet of God.
So now we're inserting cult point number 1, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When somebody thinks they have secret knowledge of God, I'm getting into Christian cults here heavy.
Yeah.
This is going to be a theme this year, you know, of anyone that thinks they have special knowledge that no one else has.
Yeah.
Run.
Yeah.
Frickin' run.
Yeah.
There's no good that's coming out of that relationship. There's no good.
Jesus is only speaking to them.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That should be a red flag.
So at this point, he's at the house. Tiffany's born.
Tiffany is born. That's as far as I went because I think we should start to... and they do have 2 other children. They have 2 sons.
2 sons, yeah.
Shortly thereafter, kind of pretty much in succession.
Just in succession, yeah.
Think Irish twins.
Couple years apiece. No, just a couple years apiece or, you know.
And I think we should talk about the Leonards.
So before we get into the Leonards, he has this basement thing going on.
Yep.
And just again to get the pretext in before the Leonards come into play, yes, he has this secret knowledge. He has this secret ability. And people are now starting to turn from a prayer group into an actual church where he's becoming the pastor. He's becoming the leader, the shepherd of the flock, so to speak. And he starts turning into this style of leadership where basically, again, it was emphasizing this strict biblical interpretation, but it's his interpretation.
Right.
It's not someone else's. It's his interpretation. And he will never say that's his interpretation. It's God telling him what the interpretation is. Again, this special power. And so what happens is, we talked about this with Heaven's Gate a bit, where they traveled and like Nexium traveled and talked to people. And what they'll do is it's a game of numbers where, you know, you get 90 people in a room, 80 people. Well, you get 20 people in a room, 17 walk out and say you're fucking crazy.
Right.
3 stay, 2 are interested, and you're hoping 1 is a ride or die.
Right.
And you do that over and over and over again. Now, the thing is like people will hang out with like people.
Right.
And so this is how it works in small towns. In small towns, you have this kind of community that is detached from a lot of things on purpose. That's why they're out there. Some of them are born out there and they just know no different, you know.
Right, yeah.
And many of them, you know, you hear that all the time out here. By the time I graduate, I'm fucking out of here. You know, and they go. And then it's funny because 5-10 years later, they come back, you know.
I'd say most of them come back.
No,
Not
that's
all
true.
Of them.
That's true kind of everywhere because home is home, you know.
Yeah.
And, but basically at this point, he's got about 10 people, maybe 20 that are going to this on a routine basis. And at this point, it's all good.
When it started, there was like 25 to 30. When they take over in the basement, it's a handful.
No, it's a
like
handful.
A half dozen. And then it starts
to slowly trickle in.
Yeah.
And it's friends, it's family members. They bring them in, and some come and they're like, that isn't for me. And they walk out. And so at this point, he's founded the church, and it resembles a conventional Pentecostal congregation at this point. 1990s, the church adopts increasingly insular practices, and this is where it starts doing the real kind of culty stuff. It encourages members to cut ties with outsiders and just begin to submit to the church's authority, quote unquote. It's Jerry's authority. The 2000s, Jerry steps down at this point, and when he's doing this, he's actually grooming Tiffany in this period of time from 90s to 2000. He's grooming Tiffany to be a future prophet, so to speak.
Yeah. He's telling her, how special she is and how important she is to God, and she is. And who wouldn't?
Is it daughter or niece no, daughter?
Tiffany is his daughter.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, he's stepping down, and the reason is health issues. Ultimately,
well, he does leave when they establish the church in Chadwick's.
The school.
When they buy the school, and they're like, "This is the church."
Yeah, I kind of leaped over that. Sorry.
He takes off to Rochester, and another pastor actually.
Yeah, so we'll backpedal to that. The basement's getting too big or too small,
right?
And so they find this school.
Yeah, they're looking for.
And the school was actually a good option, because the school was, obviously, it's not a massive school. Again, it's a small town middle school. But they had this big gymnasium in the back.
Yeah.
They had this kind of whole upstairs area where they, would live.
The third floor they turned into their...
downstairs is where they had kind of just the run-of-the-mill stuff going on. And believe it or not, right next door is a parish center for a Catholic church that is on the other side of the parish center.
The parking lot with the Catholic church and the...
Going to have some words to say about that later on. So basically, at this point, they have the building. People are coming in. At this point, this is where it's starting to get a little closed off. They had some people they were originally bringing in, because at the end of the day, churches need money.
Yeah.
So this was a big piece of the, collecting the money from members and basically getting to fund things, because now they're not just in a basement, they're in a building. Of course, it's taxed, they get the tax deduction for being a religious organization, but you still have to run the building. There's cleaning, there's maintenance,
and that was part of the thing that they did. You not only attended the services, you would have to pay your tithes to the church, and
volunteer, quote unquote.
You would use your skills and do what you could to help maintain the building. And when the Irwins take off to Rochester, I think they're gone for like a year or two. And the other pastor is running things. The church at that time gets to be the biggest it's going to be.
So this was the Wrights.
Yes. And they did interact with the community.
Richard Wright was a pastor at this point, and Richard Wright was doing things totally different.
100%.
The community was involved. It wasn't so lock and key behind the building and things like that, because they built like a hedge next to the parish center for the Catholic church. They had like a gate with like a lock, and like they had people patrolling the grounds and all that type of stuff. It was a compound.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yep.
And Rick Wright changed that whole dynamic according to the book. And had more people open and things to that regard. So then Irwins come back after a couple of years.
Yep.
And they see what's going on there.
Jerry takes back over.
Jerry takes over.
Jerry's pissed.
Because he doesn't like what's going on here.
He's... The thing that infuriates him the most is how popular...
Yeah, it's pride.
this Mr. Wright is with the congregation.
Yeah. No, it's pride.
He does his best to diminish him.
Yeah.
Or Mr. Wright's... him and his family.
Well, so here's another little layer here, because there's a lot of layers to this onion. So Rick Wright was married to one of the Irwins. It was
no, he was married to one of Mrs. Leonard.
I'm looking at my notes here.
He was related to her.
Where
yeah, he's Debbie's brother. Because Debbie's maiden name is Wright.
Whatever. Yeah, I'll have to. I got too many notes. I'm just realizing this right now. I just got notes all over the place. There's a relation in the church and the congregation through there. And this ultimately becomes kind of the pattern where everybody, again, this small town stuff where everybody either really knows each other well or they're related. And the related goes through because everybody's a fucking third cousin of somebody around here, and it's exhausting, but at that point, Jerry comes back, takes things over, brings everything back to the way he was doing it.
Yeah.
Times 4.
Yeah.
And it becomes the compound where it's locked and you can't go in unless you're allowed to.
Yep. And
you can't leave unless you're allowed to.
And we're going to actually turn this into a school. All of the kids have to now go to school.
The kids have to go to school there.
Yep.
And we're doing an optional co-op for homeschool students. And then that wasn't working out for the families. This is before getting into the Leonards because it was just a collective whole with everybody. This is when people started to pair off a bit and say, I'm getting out of here. This is not what I signed for.
Yeah, I didn't sign up for this.
What I'll call the smart/leadership ones, the ones that could think for themselves and not just be a blatant follower. And so now what you have is a smaller representation of what was once a larger whole.
Yeah.
At the best, you're having 20 people go to this church, including the Irwins. The 4 of them, Jerry.
And the crazier Jerry gets and the meaner Jerry gets, the fewer members they retain.
And to just emphasize on the crazy he gets and the meaner he gets, it becomes every service, every mass, and they're going every day.
Just about, yeah.
And they're doing multiple hours. And basically it's find out what you've done wrong so you can repent.
Yep.
And if you don't think you know what you did wrong, Jerry's going to be more than happy to tell you what you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And this leads you down. This is kind of like with Scientology, with doing the audits. You're being led to some sort of thing, whether you believe it or not, because at some point what you want to do is just get it over with.
Yeah.
And so you'll just say, that is what I'm doing.
Sorry.
Where do we move on from here?
Yeah.
Because we've been doing this for an hour now and I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
And they just wouldn't let up. So you got to understand with Jerry doing this, Tiffany, his daughter, is watching this as a young child.
Yeah.
And this is all she knows.
Yeah.
She doesn't know anything else.
No.
She was born into this.
Yep.
And she's just watching her dad do.
And she's also seeing that the rules that are applicable to everyone else aren't applicable to her. So she's already got this level of elevation.
And the
above
boys, too.
Everybody. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They 100%, they don't have to stay in the school.
No.
They don't have to do the same things that everybody else in the school is doing. They're not allowed to watch movies, but they have.
Oh, yeah.
They
No.
have things they can do.
All these things that they can have, you
Yep.
know. The brothers become kind of like the bodyguards, and they would say they were the ushers, but
No,
you
they
know,
were.
they were keeping people in when they were supposed to be in, and they were keeping people out when they were supposed to be out.
Right.
That's really the 10,000-foot level view of
Yeah.
what their role was in the church. Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
You know,
Now,
Tiffany was molded as the successor.
she was the whole
and
time.
the whole time, you know, and Jerry would work hand in hand with her to make sure she's doing that role through there. And this is where churches go out of control.
Yeah.
Starters, this is why, and everybody has a foot up their ass with this. This is why you have celibate priests running
Yeah.
a congregation, because if you have a married couple running a congregation, you have a power dynamic that sucks.
Already,
Let
there's a
alone
power dynamic.
let alone
period.
kids.
Yeah.
There's a power dynamic now.
Mhm.
The congregation's never going to say shit about these kids. They're
Nope.
never going to say shit about the wife.
Nope.
And if the wife is a pastor, they're never going to say shit about the pastor.
Or
The pastor's husband.
Yeah.
They're not going to say anything. They're not going to vent. They're not going to do any of that
Nope.
kind of stuff. And then what happens is, shockingly, is when this pastor can't do things anymore, it's always the family member that takes over. It's the daughter,
Yeah.
it's the son,
Mhm.
or whatever. There's no kind of outside process to, let's
Mhm.
say, let's bring in some other pastors and see how they would be.
Yeah.
That never happens, especially in non-denominational churches. This is
They're
so
not voting on their pope.
this is so common, and this
Yeah.
is where everybody can say, "Oh, the Pope is a stupid thing." It's like, yeah, but the Pope's voted on.
Right.
You know, it's voted on by bishops and all
Yeah.
that other stuff. But the fact is there's an institution, a larger institution at work here,
Right.
and it's not one family, La Familia, ruling the
The
whole
whole thing.
entire thing.
Yeah.
And this is when I talk to non-denominational church followers and stuff like that, and even leaders. It's like, don't you see the power dynamic you're creating
Don't you see the
by
problem with that?
being married?
Yeah.
You know, now thank goodness maybe your wife is just the sweetest thing in the world. But what if she wasn't?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the real deal. What if she wasn't?
Well,
You know,
let's go
and
with Gwen from
Gwen Shamblin
yeah.
from the weight loss cult that we
Exactly.
did a couple
There
years
was
ago.
her husband. Nothing. No complaints.
Yeah.
He fell in, but you know she decided he wasn't skinny enough for God. So,
Yeah.
all right. Nobody else in my church can get divorced, but I can.
But I can, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where these rules start to change. These
Mhm.
rules start to get different. And this is why you have celibate priests. You know, I'm not going to get into whether priests should be women or men. That's a separate conversation. But the fact is, this is why you have priests take a vow
of celibacy. Mhm.
because it's just, it doesn't work.
No.
It does not work. And then what happens is eventually this church dissolves. And then where does everybody go?
Yeah.
You know, you've
Yeah.
only brought them so far. You didn't create anything long lasting.
Right.
You didn't create anything that continues through generations. You know,
Mhm.
you're only as good as you. And this
Right.
is the big problem I have with non-denominational DIY
Mm-hmm.
churches, DIY
Yeah.
pastors, where somebody just says, "Oh, I'm going to be a pastor."
Yeah.
And then they go to a church that needs a pastor, or they start something in the basement of their house
Yeah.
or in their car, you know, and, you know, they become an Uber preacher or whatever. And look, I'm not denying somebody that they can do, you know, that they can't preach the gospel out to other people and do that kind of harvesting's not the word, but the
Outreach.
outreach and things
Yeah.
like that. But send them somewhere.
Yeah.
Don't make it be you. Because here's somebody here that hasn't done anything, any kind of proper studying of theology and stuff like
yeah,
that.
there's
Because
no theology. It's
No.
just whatever
whatever they
thinks.
interpret the Bible is.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous thing too, because the
Yes.
Bible was collected a long time ago. And it's based on cultures and traditions that are thousands of years old. And you can't read the Bible with today's mind of 2025 and put
Correct.
20, 25 ideas in there. You've got to say, okay, if they said X or Y, what was X or Y? Why was that a thing 2,000 years ago?
Yeah.
Or 2,500 years ago? Or
what made that applicable then?
And what did it mean? It's not even
yeah.
what made it applicable, because it means something different.
Yes.
Like to lay with someone. Everybody just says, oh, that's sex. No, it's that and so much more.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the big gap with it. So now this is where I'm really going to butcher non-denominational churches. If you're a member of one, I'm sorry, but you're getting hit to the mat here today. You know, now you're going to say the King James Bible is the only real Bible. That Bible was written in 1500.
Yeah.
You know, there was a church that was in existence for 500 years before that.
Well, actually, it was the church itself was was in existence
1500 years before
Correct.
that. Sorry, not 500.
Yeah.
There was a church for 1500 years before that Bible was produced.
There was a Bible.
You know, and there was a Bible
before the King
James Bible that was around for a good 500, 800 years.
Yeah.
You know, they started collecting the writings for the Bible in year 300. That's when they started collecting all the stories and all that stuff, because they're like, look, the people that knew these people are dying.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to get this together before it gets out of hand.
Yeah, they just collected
the writings.
And the writings,
you know,
that they had.
And then they did the assembling the Bible through. That's the Catholic Church, folks. I'm sorry. It is.
Yeah.
They're the ones that did it.
They did it.
They collected all the stuff.
They made the church.
You know,
they collected the stories.
Well, no, Jesus made the church.
Well,
you know, that's Jesus made the church, but the apostles went further through that.
Yep.
And non-denominationals will go nuts with it, but I'm sorry, when you slam your fist down and say the King James Bible is the end-all, be-all, and that's it, it's like, dude, that was 1500 that was assembled.
Yeah.
There was other stuff assembled before then.
Yes.
And then still, even if you're going to go off King James Bible, it's an old world language and it's an old cultures. It still contains all of that therein.
Yeah.
Of those Greek translations that they pulled it from.
And that's part of the problem is the translations and interpretations. You're getting a version of what was actually written because it was written in Hebrew and Greek and Latin and Aramaic, and there's a lot of people who, when they're translating, interpret things differently.
Oh, yeah. And they argue that to this day.
Yes.
Even the Catholics argue about it. But the thing is like, I'll give an example. Like slaves. Slaves are mentioned in the Bible. That's indentured servitude.
Right.
Like
You're
if somebody
beholden.
had a slave, they were beholden because, I mean, let's be honest here. People didn't have all the options they have right now.
No.
You had your dad's trade.
Right.
If you were a man growing up, you had your dad's trade.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you actually grew up, if you were part of, you know, like Israel and, you know, that demographic at that time, you were actually brought up to be someone holy, you know, and I've gone through those steps before and I'll go through it another time, but you know, this is a different piece through here. But then like, if you weren't cut out as a holy person, you learned your dad's trade.
Right.
End of story. Yeah. That's what it was. So if your dad was a carpenter, you were a carpenter. Yeah. If your dad, you know, made linens or whatever,
you're a baker.
You were a baker. That's it. End of discussion. No option. And the ones that ran off on it, or their fathers, you know, disowned them or whatever, you had to survive.
Right.
In a time where it was very hard to survive, even if you had a trade, even if you had something going for you. And so this is where indentured servitude would come in and say, look, I'll help you. I'll help you for room and board. I'll help you for this. And they had prices of it, you know, prices of what it meant on how many days and all this other stuff.
Yep.
And it's because so someone could exist and not die. It's different.
Yeah.
It's just completely different than the slavery that was going on in, say, like the 1800s.
Right, yes.
And out through there where people were actually property, bought as property, never had the option of go through and bought and sold and tossed around as currency.
I think we have the Romans to thank for that.
Well, actually, it's a spattering of a whole bunch of people because people became money, you know, unfortunately. But what you have here is Jerry mutating the Bible to whatever he sees fit.
Yes.
Whatever it is. And most of them, when they start doing this and when they read it, it becomes very, very apocalyptic. It becomes very, very doomsday.
Yeah.
It becomes very, very dark. And dark real quick.
People who are getting this direct line from Jesus would get more positivity and more love and more peace. Turns out, that's not how it goes.
That's when we get to the close.
Honestly, that should be a red flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, if all you're doing is reading your Bible, you should know it. You should know it. You should know it back and forth. And you should know that Jesus was all about love.
Mm-hmm.
He was all about those who were.
But that's if you have Old Testament people, they're going to get more of that brutal side of life, through there. But even, the stories of Jesus. I mean, Jesus was nothing.
Jesus is.
Yeah.
Is inspiring him.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't make that claim and not have one positive thing come out of your mouth.
Well, you can't say he can't because he did. And there was people that followed it to the letter, And so what happens, long story short, because this is a long story, and we can't guarantee how quick this is going to go. As you can see, we're 20 minutes past the hour on this one. But
we still haven't talked about the Leonards.
And we still haven't even gotten into the Leonards. So at this point, before Tiffany comes into play and all that, we have the Leonards. And
yes, the Leonards. Bruce was one of those people at the Bible studies
in the beginning,
in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And Debbie and Bruce both had previous marriages.
Debbie and Bruce Leonard.
Debbie Wright, before she married,
mm-hmm.
But I'm not even sure if she married. She had 2 children with another man.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Ferguson is one of them.
The whole Leonard family, honestly, is confusing.
It's very confusing.
It's confusing. Yeah.
Bruce was married and had a daughter,
mm-hmm.
Crystal.
Yeah.
And I believe Crystal's mother left and
mm-hmm.
they ended up getting a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce and Debbie meet at these Bible sessions
mm-hmm.
in the basement.
Yeah.
And what pisses off Jerry is when Bruce and Debbie get married, they didn't have Jerry officiate.
Yeah.
And from then on, that became like,
I'm not going to say it's the decider thing. Here's the thing. Bruce was a very
devout.
He was a very devout guy. Nobody really had a mean thing to say about him.
No. He was a teacher.
He was a teacher at
Debbie
some
was
point.
A stay-at-home mom.
Debbie was a stay-at-home mom. And like the way he raised Crystal, really good father,
mm-hmm.
taught her how to do a lot of things. The problem with Bruce was he was just very, for the word, I don't like to say meek in a bad way because there's meek in a good way.
Yeah.
But he was just easy to manipulate.
Yeah.
He didn't put much resistance on things.
No, he didn't.
He was not, even his family members said he was not, I think his brother said, he's not an independent person. He's a follower.
Yes.
He just goes in with the flow with things. And so right from the beginning, he's in this whole journey.
Yes.
With the church.
Yep.
And becomes his family. He gets them all in there. So at this point, it's his wife, Deborah, his daughter, Crystal, from the previous marriage.
Yep.
Then there's Lucas and Christopher that come into play here.
Yep.
Sarah
comes in.
Sarah comes in.
Some point.
And she has children of her own.
Yes.
I think it's 3 or 4.
2 or 3.
Yeah, 2 or 3. And so they're all living at one point in this house.
Yes. Sarah and her kids.
Mm-hmm. Sarah and her kids at one point were living with the Irwins, and this is important to bring up, but it just got too chaotic, they said in there. And so that's when she went back over to the Leonards.
Yep.
Crystal at this time, very active in the church.
Yes.
And there was animosity between Tiffany and Crystal.
Yes. Crystal was the first person to graduate from the
school, quote unquote, And then this started bringing some resentment with Crystal because Crystal had plans to go to college and she had plans to go to a university, blah, blah, blah. And then, nope, they didn't.
No, Jerry decides she's got to get married to
She's got to get married.
this guy she barely knows.
So now we're arranging marriages.
Yep.
And doing that bit of a manipulation. Like I said, it spreads out in a lot of ways. And if you're confused, I'm sorry. But we want to get this in a certain amount of time. But there's certain points in the timeline we have to interject in. And this Crystal piece with trying to get to a school, denied that, married into somebody that Jerry
chose for
her. So now she's stuck. She can't leave.
She starts having kids with him.
And they actually started becoming the breadwinners monetarily for the church.
Yes.
Her husband had a really good job.
Yep.
And they were becoming the money, so to speak.
They were the cash cow.
The leading donor, so to speak. And
the cash cow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so at this point, this is where you have a lot of bubbling things going on.
Yeah.
You have Tiffany, because Crystal's now becoming a big part of the church and the mechanism through there because she stayed.
Mm-hmm.
She's this poster child of winning because she graduated. She was the first one from the school. They're the nest egg that's kind of keeping everything running. The cash cow,
goose.
The golden goose. And Tiffany's having a hard time reconciling all this.
Yes,
trying to exist with all this, and so she is starting to develop a pride issue, a jealousy issue, an envy issue with this through here. And Jerry at this point is starting to get some health problems. As time goes on. And this goes on, I don't know how long, but it goes on for a bit, couple of years, and then everything starts breaking off in little chunks.
Yeah. Jerry gets sick.
Jerry gets real sick to the point where he can't
He has a stroke.
Yeah, he has a stroke.
Yep.
And he can't do this anymore.
Yep.
And so Tiffany gets propped up.
Yep.
And now Tiffany's running the services.
Yep.
She's running the show. She's running everything. And underneath her are her pit bosses, her two brothers.
Right.
And the mother is off to the side. And I really say off to the side. She's a fucking ringleader of a lot of...
She's breeding dogs. And that's consuming her.
Yeah, no. So they got this dog breeding thing.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, where does this stop? No, we're still going.
Yeah.
So she starts breeding dogs, and it's this massive, dog syndicate.
It's an enterprise.
It literally is an enterprise. And, but what she's also doing is talking to the other people, and what she's doing, and the congregation doesn't realize this yet, is she's kind of the rat, quote unquote, for Tiffany. She's funneling all this information. So-and-so's doing this.
Yeah.
So-and-so's doing that. And this gives Tiffany the appearance of being a prophet when she may know things that other people are confused about. How the hell could she know something like that?
Yeah.
And her mom was instrumental in that. Her brothers.
And another woman.
Yeah. The Morris.
She was the mother's friend there.
Mm-hmm.
And she was all about elevating herself.
So what happens is this crazy dynamic. Jerry's getting sick. You have Tiffany that's running the show. You got the brothers as the pit bosses. You got the mother, Tiffany's mother, who's doing this dog thing because they got to raise money for X or Y. That's just basically
one
out of
the
that.
things
They were
that
not a
brings in
lover
money.
of animals
No.
because they were treated terribly.
Yes.
Housed even worse.
Yes.
And so I'm not going to get too total into the Beverly thing of all that stuff.
No, but I think we should talk about Jerry's death.
So that's the thing we're getting into on the next step here. So at this point, Crystal's having doubts of what's going on because what Tiffany's doing was not really what she signed up for.
Yeah.
She's also pissed off. I'm not going to say pissed off, but she's let down that her dreams are disappearing in front of her.
Yeah.
Everything that she worked, her young, youthful life up to as she's watching this disappear. Even the husband's starting to turn to Crystal and say, this isn't right. You know, some of this stuff, some of this stuff that's going on here, it's going too far. It's, this or that. So they're having this talk in the background. Jerry, they're creating like this hyperbaric chamber for him to keep him going. And they spent, I think it was like $5,000 or $10,000 on this hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah, and what they bought it was supposed to be a one-time use.
Yeah.
And she's using it like daily for this guy.
Daily for this guy. So he's hanging on by a thread.
And by she, the wife, Tracy.
Yeah.
Tracy is as insane as Jerry is. So they decide this chick that she's buying dogs from is like, hey, why don't you come out to this doctor and we'll have the doctor assess Jerry. And, there's some treatments that he can do that'll help. So they load up him, Tracy, and the kids and head out to, I think it's Indiana. And
it was the Midwest. Somewhere.
Yeah, they go out to this doctor and the doctor's like, all right, we'll do this. And then he's supposed to come back to see the doctor, but he dies.
Well, actually, they were on the way to see, or no, that's after.
No.
Yeah.
So he dies.
Yeah, he dies.
Then Tracy is supposed to be going to see Barbara, and Barb can't get a hold,
Beverly.
or Beverly, whatever her name is, trying to get a hold of her, can't. And when she finally does, Tracy's driving dead Jerry all the way down to a preacher, I think, in like Louisiana.
I can't remember the state, but it's somewhere South Midwest.
Yeah.
And she was driving dead Jerry down to there because supposedly this pastor
was going to resurrect him.
So wrap your head around that for a second. And again, Jerry had the secret knowledge all the time. How did he have all this stuff going on with him? This is where it gets dangerous. Right. Eventually the lie, eventually sunlight starts hitting certain areas.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, while all this is going on, you have this congregation that Tiffany's leading through here. Tiffany's getting information and all that. Congregation has no idea any of this stuff's going on.
Yeah, they have no idea.
They just know that Jerry's sick.
Yep.
And he's not feeling well. So they're praying
for him.
So they're praying for him because they can pray
so that he could be so that's going to help with the resurrection.
That's going to help with the resurrection.
So they get to the guy who's supposed to lay hands on him and resurrect him, and the guy's like, "Get out of here!"
Yeah.
No,
because he's like 3 days dead at this point.
Exactly.
That's all I could think of was the movie Vacation. Where they have the grandmother.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Well, and Weekend at Bernie's too. But I was thinking of like Vacation, where they got the grandmother like on the roof of the car.
Yeah, Beverly's like, no, you can't do that. She's like, you do realize that if you get stopped, you're going to be arrested.
Yeah.
And you're going to be put in jail. So they go back to the hotel. They call the cops and they're like, oh, he died.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, a while ago.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us what happened?
So they fab up this story.
Yeah.
And then that deals with that. Then the congregation finds out that he's passed. And so now you've got a group of followers where their leader's gone.
That one moment where they were like, we really thought that he was going to be resurrected.
Yeah.
Like they really thought he had like this direct line to God.
Yeah,
and
that's when you're in too
deep. He
deep,
was going to
boy.
be.
Yeah.
They would never lose him.
No, that's when you're in too deep.
And it's like.
That's crazy.
I don't understand how you could have thought that. I don't know how you get there.
Yeah. It's when you're not dealing with other people, you're swimming in the same pool.
Yeah.
And this is how it happens. I mean, it's not hard.
So turns out.
I mean, let's honestly think about it. We're not far from this. 2021, there was a group of people that thought if you put a fabric mask on your mouth and stay 6 feet away from people, that it's going to reduce the risk of getting COVID. I'm sorry, I'll bring that topic out. How stupid does that sound? It sounded stupid at the time for me, but then I saw groups of people.
Remember the people that were eating the dirt?
Yeah.
the black oxygen.
Yeah, and you got kicked out of the Facebook group with it?
Yeah.
No, these people are everywhere.
Yeah.
But what's amazing is you get the swimming pool, you get enough people in there, they all convert and they all say, the water's this temperature. It's whatever it is. Yeah.
One of us.
I mean, it really, truly is. And, and now, like, take COVID, for example. CIA just published today, it's a lab leak. No shit, Sherlock. That's what we've been fucking saying for 5 years.
Yeah.
It's a damn lab leak. Of course, we all know it.
Yeah.
But, the rest of the moo cows you got to get out there eating grass.
Yeah.
They got to hear this. And now they're never going to believe it because they don't want to believe it because for 5 years they rode the hard line.
Yeah.
They destroyed relationships with their family. They haven't talked to their family in years over this fucking stupid thing. And now we're here.
Yep.
We're here in the wake of destruction of all this stuff. It's the same fucking thing. Rant over.
So turns out Jerry dying doesn't really help. And now they're not only having these issues, but now they've got some financial issues. And Jerry dying actually causes another one of the
That's what I was going to
breaks
get at because
of another exodus of people out of the church.
Well, and the reason for that is number one, the cash thing became a problem because they were spending a lot of money on Jerry on trying to get him up or right or whatever. On top of that, you have Tiffany, who's now leading the show, and she's doing it her way, quote unquote, which is basically what her father was doing on steroids.
Right.
And, just massive manipulation, massive intimidating, the whole repentance and these meetings they would have, basically like these counseling sessions.
Yeah. Mass could last anywhere from like an hour and a half
to 4 4 or 5 hours or more,
and you are required to stay the entire time.
So now what you're getting is the exhaustion.
Yep.
You're getting people that aren't thinking correctly.
Yeah.
They're getting a lot of pressure on them. Now there's the whole statement that she makes of, so this is when people start peeling away. Then she really just comes out, says it indirectly, but not indirectly, to, what's her name? The daughter.
She implies that someone is supposed to make a $10,000 donation.
Or more. And if they don't, bad things are going to happen to
members of their family.
Yes.
And it was one of the brothers said to Crystal, "We know it's you."
Yeah. And
Crystal's husband's like, "You're not using my money."
So that's when Crystal and her husband exit stage right.
Yeah.
And they were the first one of the Leonards to break.
Yes.
And the only ones.
Yeah.
So they break and they're like, we're done. And so there comes this period of time where it really stays status quo. You have these small core people. You have the Morys, you have the Wrights, you have the Irwins in there, and you have the Leonards. And basically they're the core piece of this whole thing. There's really not much aside from them. And what would happen is they'd have the kids upstairs, the younglings, and then they would do these long masses, long church. I don't even want to call them masses.
No.
Because they weren't.
No,
and
it's really just Tiffany prattling on and humiliating either Debbie and or Bruce in front of the congregation.
Well, and then this is what happens is at this point, like the Leonards become like the focus of everything.
Yeah.
The Morys are not in it so much.
No. And
the Wrights are not in it as much. And a lot of it was, you really start, this is at the point where you're reading the book and you're reading the stories and you're looking and you're like, this is fucking insane.
Yeah.
How just one family starts becoming the brunt of all this stuff, because I'll say it for what it was. They were the weakest.
Yes.
They were the weakest in the group.
Yep.
So you had a bunch of weak people going after weaker people.
Yes.
I mean, I really can't say it any more than that.
No,
there was not a strong person in this whole thing.
No.
From Tiffany all the way down, even Jerry. Jerry was not a strong person.
No, he wasn't.
Because strength would require to say, this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And no one was ever doing that. The strongest people left with Crystal and her husband. That was it. they left. And so what happened was they started going to another church.
Yep.
And they got very involved in there.
Some other members that had left Word of Life also started going to that church.
And they were praying for the other Word of Life members in the hopes that that could help.
Lucas actually did accompany them to their church.
So let's segue into Lucas a bit. So Lucas is the brother.
He's the oldest.
And the oldest boy.
Debbie and Bruce's kids.
Yep. And he's this smart kid.
Yeah.
Just
really good mechanically.
Yeah, good with his hands.
Yep.
Just smart as well. Studied a lot, knew a lot of the Bible. He was getting to the point where he was reciting whole books of Psalms and just whole books of the Bible he could recite. He was a lifeguard at the park nearby and had good relationships with everybody he encountered. There wasn't, again, like his dad. There wasn't really a whole lot of issue there.
He was only allowed to be a lifeguard for one season. And the guy who was running the pool was actually surprised that Lucas didn't come back for another season because they were saying it was his dad saying, no, you can't do that.
Well, and it wasn't just the dad. It was Tiffany telling the dad, no, he can't be doing this. And that's how everything came through. Every member of this congregation did something on the authority of Tiffany or the approval of Tiffany.
Or Jerry.
Everything. Well, no, Jerry's out of the picture at this point. He's dead.
Yeah.
So everybody has to run things up to Tiffany, and they got to run down from Tiffany. Not the decision was made without this woman's
input,
authority.
Yeah.
And it's typical cult behavior at this point. Congratulations. You're in a cult.
Yeah.
And so Lucas starts becoming a curious young boy, as he's growing up. He's meeting and seeing other people because he would walk people's dogs and pet sit and stuff like that, again, to make money to give to the church. And he's starting to see life outside of the church, much like his sister Crystal.
Yeah, he's getting, he's rebelling a little bit.
He's rebelling
against the church
and being smart with the church and having an attitude, quote unquote. Again, it's testing boundaries. It's testing all this stuff.
Yeah.
And this creates this negative situation as far as the church is concerned, because now Bruce doesn't have a hold of his family. Right. Crystal's left.
Yeah.
Lucas is a problem.
Yep.
Now the brother Christopher, Lucas and Chris are close in
they have to share a room.
They have to share a room, so they're spending more time together. And Chris becomes the same curiosity as Luke has been. But Luke was more rebellious than Chris.
Yes.
Chris was very much like his father as far as a follower, staying in the lane, all of that stuff. So this bit with Lucas starts to escalate. It becomes a bigger and bigger problem. There's these counseling sessions, and he's not making them easy.
No.
And so at one point, he reaches out to his sister Crystal and says, they went to a family gathering. It was like a grandmother. And this is the first time Crystal's seen her family
since they left.
And this is, I think, like a year or two. It's a long period of time. And they talk. They have a great time.
Yep. They hug.
And
she starts communicating.
She starts communicating with Lucas.
And Lucas communicates with her.
Yep. And then Lucas pings her one day and says, is it okay if I go to church with you? Yeah. And she's just sitting there like, holy crap, this is going to happen. Talk to her husband. What do we do? And they're like, let's just be slow.
Yep.
Have him come and let him know that he has a place to stay. And that's exactly what they did. He went to the church and
she's like, do you want us to drop you off, or do you want to stay with us for a while? And he went home.
And he said, I got to go home.
And that was the last time she saw him.
And basically what took place from there on in, we'll give a kind of cliff notes because I really don't want to give this portion more credit than it needs. But at this point, the house is in disarray at the Leonards. It's a mess.
Yeah, it is.
the
There's
top floor with
1, 2, 3, 4 people living on the top floor. The Leonards have 4 kids.
Yeah.
And
so Sarah Ferguson and her kids are on the top
upstairs,
level.
and the Leonard's daughter is living up there.
And then you had the boys who were...
The boys are all downstairs. There's the Lucas and Christopher, and then there's a younger
And they even put
boy.
the sleeping conditions, like there's mattresses on the floor if they had mattresses.
Yeah.
Lucas put a like a chair,
recliner
like a
in the
recliner in a closet.
And that's where he
lived.
lived.
That's where he literally lived.
Yeah.
The upstairs where Sarah Ferguson and her kids, they had a door that was padlocked on both sides.
Yes.
Which, as you're reading in the book, that's pretty weird, but you're going with it.
Yep.
And then what ends up happening is there's a day where they have mass. I can't.
October 11th.
Mass is a habit for me, but
October 11th, 2015.
October 11th, they have a service.
Yep.
Not going to call it mass because it's a disgrace to the word. But they have a service, and basically at this point, Tiffany Irwin says everyone needs to leave.
Everyone can leave except the Leonards.
Except the Leonards. And so everyone leaves. The Morys stay. And this is where the facts get a little tough.
And they do like this counseling thing for a while, but Lucas has to leave because he and his dad leave for a second because he's got to
watch a pet, let him out or whatever.
Yep.
And they don't even believe that's true at this point. And the whole point of the counseling session was how basically Bruce is losing control of his family.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the counseling session.
Yes.
And again, the facts are a bit on this. And like I said, this is where the book really gets into kind of a play-by-play. But even the author said, this is the best I could do with interviews, all that stuff.
She pieced it together from the police interviews and what was brought up. And it's just
the best information they have. So at this point, they come back, and now it fully ratchets up.
Yeah, Christopher and Lucas sit down together first for a counseling session, and she brings up the rebellion, and
that's directed at Bruce. Like, don't you have control of your family, blah, blah, blah. And then they start going after Christopher first. And Christopher, they just start getting into the interrogation, basically, of what are you hiding from? What are you hiding from us? Blah, 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 blah. It eventually comes out that there was, he said that he was basically fondling. And,
he talks about porn first.
Well, porn first.
Porn is the addiction.
Again,
and then she digs in.
We literally could do 40 minutes on this whole thing. We can't. There's the porn and all that, but it eventually goes to fondling Sarah Ferguson's kids. And Lucas brought that up, to the forefront of it.
They both admit to it.
And then in between on all of this, they start beating them.
Yes.
One of Tiffany Irwin's, one of the Irwin boys.
Yes.
Starts, kicking, punching.
Yeah, he punched
Christopher first
in the gut.
Yeah.
And then
and this is where it gets mixed because
it out on...
not everybody's story. And again, this is why I want to get through this, because the real meat and potatoes of this whole story is after they get arrested. Yeah. Like after the murder. After the murder is where the crazy shit happens, which I know that's hard to believe, but trust me, hang on to the handlebars a little while longer. So what they end up doing is they end up beating these two all night.
They do.
The mother, father, Bruce, the mother, Debbie, Sarah did the worst of the beatings.
She did.
And they did it with a wound up, basically like a
cord.
It's like a computer cord.
Yeah.
That you would have from like a standing desktop PC, that black cord. They wound it up and they were whipping them with that, both of them. And Sarah went to town on Luke.
Both of them.
Well, yeah, but on Luke in a huge way.
Yeah, she did.
And basically just whipping and whipping and whipping, stomach, back, privates, legs.
Definitely at his privates,
the legs, everything. And Luke actually had like a hole in his penis
They originally thought when he was
He had a
taken to the
gunshot,
hospital, they thought it was a gunshot.
So they separate him, and they're trying to separate him, and now, I mean, it's just out of control.
Yeah.
And Tiffany's watching the whole entire thing take place.
Yeah, she's
right
just
before her
sitting
eyes.
back.
She's just sitting back, and she put her 2 cents in here and there.
Yep.
But you have the father, the mother, and the sister, and one of the Irwin boys. They're all beating up these 2 kids.
Yeah, and at one point, the Irwin boy is holding the Leonard boy.
Yeah, holding him up because he can't stand up anymore.
So that they can continue
to beat him.
Yep.
And you ask and you say, how the hell do you get here? This is the exhaustion of a cult, the chipping away, the breaking down. And you have these people, they're not sleeping well because they're at the church the whole fucking time.
Yeah.
And when they're not at the church, they're supposed to do 3 hours a day reading the Bible.
Yeah.
And come back with all of this stuff. I mean, they're spent.
Yeah.
And then you've got the mind attacks of all this stuff.
Yep.
And then you find out that they're molesting kids, and that just breaks them over.
Yeah.
So at this point, this goes on all night long.
Yes.
Literally from 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, all the way till like 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
Now they find out that Luke's unresponsive.
Yeah.
He's not breathing.
Yep.
Chris
So
is barely functioning.
They bring Tracy, the mother, down,
Mm-hmm.
and she says, we have to get him to the hospital.
Yeah.
And that's when they're like, well, and she goes, we have to take, because she's doing CPR at this point.
Well, she's trying to do CPR, but she can't do everything with it.
Yep.
She's doing chest compressions. So out of everyone in that whole entire group, Chris, his brother, who's just gotten beaten all night, is doing the mouth to mouth to his brother.
And then
Which
Tracy,
let's take a pause there, because if any of the family members are listening to this, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Here's somebody you beat up, your relative, your sibling, your son, and you can't even help with trying to resuscitate this kid.
Yep.
You know,
then Tracy realizes that because he's been beaten all night, he doesn't have the lung capacity to
breathe.
do effective breaths for him.
Well, and also, I mean, what's broken down there?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yep.
So they throw him in a van. They put him on a tarp first so he wouldn't bleed all over the place.
Yeah.
They throw him in a van. And so now, this is why I wanted to fast forward to this part. They get to the hospital. And now the thing is the hospital's got questions.
Yes.
What's going on here?
Yep.
And they're not talking.
No.
None of them are talking. Not a single one of them.
No.
Period.
Yep.
And this is,
And that's when the hospital.
I was aggro reading about this in the book. It's like unbelievable, but not unbelievable. This is how cowardly every single one of these people are. They're fucking cowards. And
the hospital staff pull him out, and they're literally working on him in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And they finally get him in a stretcher. They take him in, but they know instantly that.
And then what they do is they cut his pants off and they see all the bleeding.
Yes.
And so basically this is how he died, just to get a grasp of what the hell took place there. His bruises were so bad that he was basically building up with fluid on the inside, and he was basically
it was the dehydration.
Edema. He had edema from all the wounds. So dehydration was one of it. He was just completely dehydrated. But also there was so much trauma and edema with all the wounds that it was starting to eat away his organs.
Yeah,
and he was
like
getting organ failure. He had blood poisoning. This is how bad and how long they beat this kid.
Yes.
And
so the parents and everyone who was in the car, the parents,
the van. So that was Bruce, that was Debbie,
Tiffany, and Tracy.
No, Tiffany wasn't there.
Yes, she was.
Well, she stayed back. She didn't go into the hospital.
No, she didn't. Yeah. But anyone who was in that vehicle was taken by the police.
Yeah. And basically what happened is they had Chris in a different vehicle. Tiffany texted her brother, who was driving the vehicle with Chris in it, and said, don't come to the hospital.
Yeah.
So it's already a problem.
Yep.
You know, and so she's orchestrating all this stuff. She's trying to talk to everybody, and she's telling everybody, don't talk unless you have a lawyer, blah, 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 all of this stuff. Amazing
Meanwhile,
pastor. Great pastor, by the way.
Yeah.
Just
the
complete
cops are
accolades
talking
through
and they're
there.
like, you gonna tell us what happened?
So the cops are asking what'll happen, and you would think the parents would want to know exactly what's going on. What's nothing. They are not saying a word.
No.
An absolute word.
No, it's hours before Bruce is like,
well, and here's the thing. Bruce
son?
doesn't even know that his son's dead yet.
No.
Debbie doesn't either.
No.
And then finally the police get to the point of saying, look, your son didn't make it. And that honestly made it even worse.
Yeah.
They weren't talking
Bruce
at
shuts
all.
down, but they do get information out of Debbie. That's when that's when they realize that all of this happened at the church.
Well, because originally what
building.
they said was they found him on Oneida Street, which is where this church is, and they just found him on the side of the road.
Yeah.
That was the original story they said. But then the police start prying and saying, like, look, he was beaten a lot.
Yeah.
This wasn't something that was just, even the medical examiner said they were like, a person who boxes 10 rounds in a boxing match could never get these kinds of injuries. No. They'd have to box in literally like 100-round boxing match.
Yep.
The beating is just unbelievable.
Immense,
and there's pictures of the edema and all of this, the wounds. It's terrible to see. And not just terrible to see. It's his family. Yeah. And his church congregation that did this to him. It's supposed to be the two most safest things in your life. Yep. And they killed him. Yeah.
They did.
I mean, it just and so now goes out the long drawn process of getting all of these people together.
They go out to the Word of Life and they're like, well, good luck. And they're like, well, no.
Yeah, we're the police.
This is a crime scene, so we're coming in.
Yeah.
And the Irwin brothers are MIA. Mm-hmm. And the cops are like, we're looking for you. And finally, one of the brothers comes in.
Yeah.
And he starts talking, and that's when they realize there's another person that was involved. And
now they're after Chris.
Now we got to find Christopher.
Yeah, who was at the church the whole entire time.
He was there the whole time. Mm-hmm. And if anyone had he had this same beating that Lucas did.
It just blows my mind.
So they finally locate Christopher, take him to the hospital, and he's in ICU because oddly enough, his organs are also failing.
Well, he's close to it.
Yeah.
And the doctor said, like, if you waited 5 days, he'd be dead. Within that 5 days.
Yeah, if they had waited any longer.
If they waited another week, in that week, at some point, he would have had organ failure and died. So again, strike two for all these people that think they're great followers of Jesus, and they think that they're Christians. Yeah. And they also think that, not just that, I'm not even going to throw that you just think you're good people.
Yeah.
Get the whole Christian thing and the whole...
And the pastor telling you not to say anything.
Yeah.
To get a lawyer.
And,
hey, don't bring the other one that we killed.
Yeah.
That we were beating
you're
up.
just not a good person.
No, you're not.
Period. Let alone think you have the authority of someone holy.
No.
Or something like that. It just... it burns me up. It really, truly burns me up. That just the fact that no one stood for these two kids.
Nobody.
At all.
Nobody.
Biggest cowards in the world. I'm sorry. And I'd say it to their face. Those two boys, the two brothers, cowards. Tiffany, coward. Bruce, coward. Every single one of them, coward.
Yeah.
Even the Wrights and everyone and the Morris after that. You know what the hell happened.
Yeah.
It was all in the conversations. You guys knew what happened. Yeah. And Chris is still sitting up there, and you're fine with that.
Yeah.
You're a terrible person.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
End of statement.
You're part of it.
I hope they've grown since this. I mean, it just so October 12th, which was a day after this is when the police execute a search warrant at the church, and they arrested multiple individuals at this time. The key arrests were Tiffany Irwin, the church leader, and was arrested and charged with orchestrating the attack. Of course, she denied direct involvement, but was later implicated by witnesses and evidence.
Turns out they like to record all of the sessions.
They record every single session,
but
that one was missing. by chance. It was burned.
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah. And there's a lot more detail in the book with that. Like I said, if you're blown away by this and you want to know more, get the book.
Yeah.
The book is spectacular as far as that's concerned. Bruce and Debbie Leonard, parents of the victims, they got charged for the roles in the beatings. Sarah Ferguson, Lucas and Christopher's sister, who led the assault and delivered some of the most severe blows. And Joseph Irwin and Linda Morey, the church members who participated in the attack. They were there too.
Yep.
And the charges were basically manslaughter, assault, gang assault, a variety of things.
Yep.
So we get to the legal proceedings, and of course, the court it reveals these abusive dynamics within the church and the role that Tiffany Irwin had as an authoritarian leader.
Yep.
Eventually, what happened? Tiffany Irwin pled guilty to manslaughter and assault charges. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison for orchestrating the fatal attack. Sarah Ferguson got the most out of everybody, convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 25 years in prison for her direct role in Lucas Leonard's death. Bruce Leonard, the father, pled guilty to first-degree assault and received a 10-year sentence. Debbie Leonard pled guilty to first-degree assault and received a 5-year sentence. Joseph Irwin and Linda Morey pled guilty to lesser charges and received reduced sentences. And Christopher Leonard's testimony was instrumental in securing these convictions.
Yes.
His survival exposed the church's violent practices, and it ultimately led justice for his brother. So one note to be said about these sentences. So you had Bruce, who pretty much just said, "Look, I'm gonna plead guilty." The DA actually, throughout time of this whole thing, started getting a soft spot for Bruce, and the way he worded it, and it was captured in the book, which I thought was incredible, was he was a good man that did a bad thing.
Yeah, and also Bruce was the only one who was actually showing remorse for his actions.
Correct. Not only remorse, but also many people came from his daughter, Crystal, to people that were formerly in the church and people that just knew Bruce that were saying, this is a good man. This is a really, really good man. And again, the DA, I think, brought up the perfect perspective of it. He was a good man that just did a terrible thing. Now, Deborah, on the other hand, his wife, no remorse whatsoever. And basically what they had, I forget the legal name of it, but they had a certain deal that they were going to do where they all pled guilty and they were going to get a better
I think they were all going to do Alford, please?
I forget what it is, but basically
they're essentially saying, well, I didn't do it, but the
so
evidence says I did.
Yeah. No, I'm saying I'm not guilty, but the evidence is saying that I'm guilty, and they're going to get this special deal. Personally, I think that was a shitty move. They should have just went after him like dogs.
Yeah.
Because what happened is they spun it with this, and this is what Deborah Leonard said. Well, I only did this because of the deal. I'm innocent. Right, defiant, right at the end. Now, they've been in jail for a year. They've been doing this whole case. They've had plenty of time to think about it.
Yeah.
This isn't 1 to 2 weeks or even a month after this happened.
And even when Tiffany pled guilty, when she went out before the judge, she's like, I want to take that back because I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And they were all like, she is the most heartless person that we've ever met.
No, walked in like she owned the place, like she was the prophet of the world because she thinks she is.
Yes.
And basically what took place was her just saying, I'm not responsible for any of this. And it's like, it's your church.
Yeah.
You're the shepherd of the flock here.
Nothing happened in that church without your say-so.
Yeah. Well, no, even if something happened.
Even outside the church, nothing happened without her say-so.
No, but I'm just saying, even if something did happen, you're still responsible.
Yeah.
That's your flock.
Yeah.
That's your congregation. You're responsible for all of them. Of everything that happens in that building. It's like the captain of a ship, and it just goes to show that out of all of them, the only one that had any remorse was Bruce.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to get there because of the deprogramming that had to go on. But all of them, I'm sorry, none of them stood up at any time and said this needs to stop.
No.
None of them stood up and said we need to get him out of here, or both of them out of here.
Yeah.
None of them stood up and said, oh, we need to get Chris some medical attention because look just what happened to his brother.
Nope.
None of them wanted to stand up and claim ownership accountability, all these traits of leaders.
Yeah.
And that's why I said in the beginning, 2 hours ago, there wasn't a single leader in this building.
No.
Not one. None of them are leaders. And Tiffany, in my opinion, is a survivalist. So were her brothers.
Mm-hmm.
They were raised in that church. They didn't know anything else. And the moment Jerry died, especially the wife too, they didn't know how to exist because their cash cow, Jerry, is gone.
Yeah.
And now they got to figure out how to keep this ship afloat. And Jerry, as shitty of a person he did, no one died under his watch. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, this was going to hell in a handbasket one way or another.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what to do. They weren't ready for any of this. They didn't know how to handle any of this. Even the money. They didn't even know how to raise money because they didn't know how to work. They didn't know how to do anything. You know, they knew how to depend on these people that followed them. And that's a very, very just massive recipe of disaster.
So I have some updates.
Yeah.
Bruce, the dad, was released from prison May of last year. He served his 10 years. And the other one that's out is Joseph Irwin. He was released in 2022 after serving 6 of his 8-year sentence for gang assault. And I'm going to assume that Linda, who only had the 5 years, she's likely out as well.
No, she's out as well, yeah. No, it's terrible.
Oh, and Deborah was released.
Deborah, recently.
2020, Deborah Leonard was released after serving 3 of her 5-year sentence.
Bruce has got a few years left.
No, Bruce is done.
Oh, he is done?
He's out.
Okay. And then, no, Tiffany's got it. She's got a few years left.
Yep.
And then Sarah Ferguson's not till like 2035 or 32 or something like that.
They determined that it was her that delivered the blow that killed him.
No, definitely. And then here's the thing. They do all of this investigating on the kids that were molested, quote unquote, and found nothing.
Nothing. And what's funny,
we can't really skip that whole part of it. The whole reason they beat them, and the whole reason they tore them apart. So now you got to ask, why did the boys say it? And I think the DA has a good example of this, and I believe it too. I think Luke was in a position where he knew he couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And that was his way of getting out.
Yeah.
You know, and just, I'm going to take this whole place down with me. You know, if you're going to destroy me, I'm going to just, you know, because I mean, you think about it, in my opinion, and people can say what they want, but I believe this is the true version of martyrdom right here.
Yeah.
Where, you know, this young guy dies and a beam of light shined on that whole entire building.
Yeah.
And all its parts.
Yep.
And everybody got to see what they are, who they are.
Yep.
And just the terrible, terrible people they could be.
Yeah.
Even Bruce, as nice of a guy, you can be a nice person and still do a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's.
But I mean, it took him a while, but he's the one who actually admitted that it wasn't a church, that it was a cult.
Well, and that took over a year.
Yeah.
It took a couple years, and he had a guy that was visiting him every single week, talking to him. And then the DA started to talk to him.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if you don't mind, I was going to read these things here that Bruce put through, and no offense to the author or Bruce, we didn't get any permission, but I think this is worth reading. So Bruce has a reflection, and he writes basically what he came up with as his own warning signs of potential spiritual abuse.
Yes.
And I think this is awesome, and I think this would be the best place to close.
Yes.
You know, so it's a bit lengthy, but I'll blast through it. It's not too bad. I think it's about 25 points or so. Don't let a person become, quote, as God, unquote, to you. It can happen gradually without realizing it's happening. Pay attention if your scriptural church really revolves around a single personality with a prophetic anointing. Disciple, disfellowship, and shunning. People are social right from the start. If we don't get our, quote, social, unquote, it messes with our well-being and is a potent control technique. Length of Sunday service, open-ended, hours long, kept going as long as God was inspiring or God said stop. Bruce didn't feel free to ask for time off from the work crew or leave a service early to do something secular or social, like visit my ungodly relatives. Such action would meet Jerry's or Tiffany's sharp disapproval. The next one, controlled interactions, even not on discipline. We discouraged from just social chit-chat. I now believe that is wrong. Arranged marriage, and he gets into Crystal's and Helen's. Arranged marriages. Marriages went kerplunk, failed. Makes you wonder how well Pastor heard from God. Bruce said he doesn't believe his marriage to Debbie was arranged. He goes, we're still married, 25 years. Don't know if we'll come out of this together, but there's hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's an incredible statement after all that.
Yeah.
You know? I think he's growing a lot more than she is.
Oh, he definitely grew a lot more than she did.
And I think that's probably not going to work out to his hopes, but you never know. Maybe he can rub off on her. Controlled education. To send our kids to public school was a definite no-no. As godly parents, how could you even think about letting your kid go to a bullying, secular, perverted setting? Well, we got kicked out of church school.
Yep, they did.
Next page. Bad-mouthing former members. Leadership saying they left because they were rebellious. And so that was anybody that left.
Mm-hmm.
It was never under a good circumstance. It was never that someone left the state and said, oh, they got this nursing degree and blah, blah, blah. They're going to do the Lord's work, on this or that. Nope. Every single person that left, it was rebellion.
Right.
Coerced holiness. In the time between Pastor Jerry Irwin dying and then his daughter Tiffany taking the reins, it seemed like there was a tightening and forcing of holiness and seemed like everyone was getting called out for perversion, which I think is probably the one area most of us fail and thought, if not indeed. God calls us, looks for a response from us. He does not normally do a coerced threat. Do this or else. Tiffany did some to do or else. That was her game plan. One quick thing to add. Another family that left, their kids were getting accused of molesting children from Tiffany and gang, quote unquote. And they left because they were like, this isn't even true.
Yeah.
So again, terrible stuff. Next one he wrote, public openness. Maybe 10 to 12 years ago, we had a sign out front, church name, hours of service. The sign got taken down. I forget why, but it never got put back up. Pastor said God would bring the people that he/God wanted there, and God was well able to do so. Furthermore, Pastor said God said the increase in people would come when we were ready. Looking back, I think that was a withdrawal rather than an outreach.
Yep.
Ends justify the means. Not if you're doing things Jesus style. Jesus never beat the devil out of anyone. The closest he came was drive the money changers out of the temple, but they were free to flee. And he's right there.
Yeah.
No one was specifically assaulted. Jesus kept the law. In our case at Word of Life, if Luke had not died, we would have gone home with 2 assaulted boys, and that would somehow have been okay. That's really scary. I mean scary in the sense of it would have been a, quote, church-sanctioned, quote, crime. Bad precedent. Very bad. The potential ripples from that are also scary to think about. One could argue that Jesus was also a lawbreaker, but the difference is that he broke man-made laws that were at odds with God's law. But no violence, no vigilante action. I remember reading this in bed, and I turned to you, and I was like, that is scary. And I repeated it to you, and it bears worth repeating again. where he said, in our case at Word of Life, if Luke had not died, we would have gone home with 2 assaulted boys, and that would somehow have been okay. That's really scary. I mean, scary in the sense of it would have been a church-sanctioned crime. Bad precedent, very bad. That's the crazy thing. If they lived, no one would have ever known.
No.
And it would have been okay there.
Yeah.
It would have set a precedent.
Yeah.
Which is just,
yeah,
for him to make that leap, to say that, think it, say it, write it down in times of, all this happening. It's so transformative. It's unbelievable. Next one, prophetic words with a threat of calamity. A real example, quote, God is speaking to someone here to give a sum of money. If you're not obedient in this, you leave or open the door for something bad, even life-threatening, to happen to a member of your family. My daughter and husband left the church without giving the $10,000 mentioned. Then October 11th, 2015 happened. That was the murder.
Yeah.
Looks like fulfilled prophecy. Wow, that word was right on. Leadership can now take credit for accurate word they, quote, heard from God, thus reinforcing that God speaks to them or through them. It also sets up the person who didn't obey, in this case giving the money, as the fall guy to blame for this calamity. It's a line of crap, but nevertheless, you can use scripture to prove it. Just terrible people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, Tiffany directly, for her to say that.
Yeah.
To literally say it. So in the event that, say, something did happen, see, I was right.
What do you mean in the event?
No, I'm just saying, like, at the time.
She knew if she wasn't going to get that money, then she was going to go after somebody in the Leonard's family.
And that's why she didn't get in the way of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Either way, they're learning a lesson in her eyes.
Right. Yeah.
Pay me our frickin' money check.
Give me my money.
Yeah.
Or this happens to you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, it's incredible. And to call it a church, give me a break.
Yeah.
Next point. Leadership prayers are better. Parens, more anointed, powerful. And he says, really? He goes, it is scriptural to go to the priest or elders for prayers. But when the elders make a point that their prayers carry more weight than general congregation, or when certain persons are left out of the prayer request chain because they would weaken the effort, watch out.
Yeah.
And man, we've done a lot of cults, and I never really kind of picked up on that one. That one was a big thing where, these priests and elders, if they think that their prayers can carry more weight than the general congregation, get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
That is a terrible situation. And then the last one, single source of information. He said, looking with hindsight, I realize I believe negative things about current and ex-members, including family members, from the single source of pastor, hearing from God, which I regarded as a reliable, trustworthy source. That led to suspicion, separation without additional proof, and without hearing their side. I think there may have been some degree of gaslighting too. You hear an accusation from a reliable source, and part of you moves to believe it without additional proof. Ain't that something that's going around everywhere? And he wanted to emphasize that it's important to investigate any conflictions among your emotions, instincts, and reasoning. He said, I think all the points I listed had something that didn't sit quite right at the time, but it was on the edge of my mind, more in the feelings, not big enough to challenge, got pushed down or inside via, quote, it's scriptural, they're hearing from God, or emotions are very changeable, therefore unreliable, unquote. He may have even been reluctant to pursue those feelings, he said, because he was afraid of the answer. And in closing, he said, emotions have a valid voice, and there's a reason underlying each, which should be integrated into conscious thinking and action. I greatly regret not listening to my emotions, troubling to really investigate to get to the bottom of them. Might have avoided some current pain and shame for many. To walk out of there and learn all of that.
The only one.
And he's the only one.
Yep.
Out of everyone in there.
Yep.
Every single one.
Yep.
It's just.
And I'd like to remind everyone that even though Tracy, Mother Irwin, was not there, she was in the building. She was being updated, and she knew what was happening at all times. She could have at any point said, that's enough.
Any single one of them.
Anybody.
And again, it went on for hours and hours all night. It was literally 12 hours.
Yeah.
Just about 12 hours of just straight up beating, interrogation, counseling, quote unquote. And so everyone in that
fucking word.
Everyone in that building knew exactly what was going on.
Yep.
And like I said, after it, everyone knew what the hell was going on because they were all talking to each other. Here's another thing they were doing. Again, if they want to come out and talk about how great they are, nothing says guilty more than this. A way they were communicating, because some people don't know about this. Others, you will, if you're following true crime stuff. But a big thing that drug traffickers do, at least they used to do, is you get a secure email client, or a secure email service. And then what you do is you give everyone the username and password. And what you do is communicate as drafts. So you're not really sending anything over the wire.
Everybody just reads
for
the
an email.
Draft.
And everybody communicates through the draft. You could literally create it as a thread.
Yeah.
And they were doing this.
Yes.
There is no reason a group of people or a church should communicate like this.
No.
You are doing terrible things.
Yeah.
If you're communicating like this. This is stuff that pedophilia rings do.
Yeah.
This is
getting into the darkness.
In my history of cybersecurity, I've never seen a good implementation of that way of communicating.
Right.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I've never heard it. It's always been some crime syndicate.
Yeah.
Some pedophilia ring, something dark and terrible. And that's how they communicate. And they were communicating like this.
Yep.
They were doing it all through the leading up to the arrest. There's not a good thing about this whole situation at all. No. And I pray every time that everybody.
I bet those walls in that school missed the recorder days and the.
No, I just pray that they all get a transformation that Bruce is having.
Yeah.
That's what I pray for.
Yeah.
I pray that they just wake up and realize what they've done, and just work on it, work on it every day. 'Cause until then, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I firmly believe you will hear about Tiffany being in another church.
Oh yeah,
leading
she's going to
people.
start another cult.
She'll go to another state or she'll go somewhere else. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
I pray not.
Oh, she's learned nothing.
I think the person who's learned the least out of this whole thing is her.
Yes.
Without a doubt. And I hope she proves me wrong. I really do. But I don't see it. Especially reading all the evidence, the interviews, the court appearances and all that stuff. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. It really is. Out of all the cults we've done, this was the worst one to muddle through.
Yeah.
And the crazy part was you used to go to school in that building.
Hey guys, for those of you who have ever been in the Chadwick's Junior High, aside from the third floor, the paint on the walls has not changed.
I was going to ask you, is it the same?
It has not changed.
Yeah. And it's still for sale. I read something in there that would say definitely, aside from a cult killing someone there, and the asbestos, what they actually did in the basement floor underneath the building is they knocked down lanes through.
They put a huge hole in.
So they could create an indoor
shooting range.
And they
destroyed
mentioned in the book they actually destroyed the structure to where
the
the structural integrity of
Yeah.
it. So, yeah, they'll never sell. They should just demolish that
They
building
should, yeah.
and
They
just start
should
over.
knock it down.
You know, put a home there or park. You know,
I don't know. A lot of darkness happened there.
well, you know, sometimes you got to bring light through things. And, you know, a cool thing that they did, you know, they have a bench at the park where he used to be
it
a
overlooks
lifeguard
the
at,
pools.
and it overlooks the pools, and it's in his memoriam.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's crazy. What
Yeah.
gets me is that whole town, that whole area knew that was going on. Not that specifically,
No, they knew there
but
was
they knew
a
there was some
cult in
weird
there.
shit
Yeah.
going on there. And I'm sorry, I think there needs to be some sort of rules in place to where someone can call and say there needs to be a health check in that building.
Well, the
There
police
needs to
tried.
be,
The police
you know,
tried to go in there several times, and they couldn't. And the only time they were successfully able to get in there was when they had a search warrant, which said they legally had the
No,
right
that's what
to
I'm
be in
saying.
there.
The
Yeah.
current laws don't work. There
Yeah.
needs to be some sort of law that still respects people's privacy and respects people's ability to congregate and pursue their religion, but also just from the aspect of just say a house that has some crazy shit going on. You know, there needs to be some sort of rule or law or some sort of agreed stance of a community that's willing to accept to say, you know what, when everybody in the neighborhood thinks something's going on in there, there needs to be some sort of just kind of door knock and just like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? You know, but the tough part of a cult is if you had a police officer come before that whole thing happened, we used to talk about this with Scientology. You walked in there and they
Nobody
said,
would leave.
does anybody want to leave here? No, we're good.
Yep.
We're right where we want to be. And that's evil, folks. That's just evil right at its core. So, thanks for hanging on with us for over 2 hours with this.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we weren't too scatterbrained about it, but yeah, it was a lot of layers to this.
Yeah.
And we left a lot of stuff out.
We did.
A lot of stuff. But again, if you want to know more about it and get more details that we did miss and get a complete picture, I really just can't recommend.
You can't get a more clear picture than the book.
Yeah, without a prayer.
Aside from actually having been there.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be the closest we're ever going to get.
Yeah, without a prayer.
Or unless Christopher decides he wants to tell his story.
And will he remember a lot of it? You know?
Yeah,
I mean, there's the whole kind of trauma and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, the book's Without a Prayer by Susan Ashline, Ashline. And definitely recommend it. Without a doubt, even just to support her as an author.
Yep.
It's because what a labor of love, boy. I can't imagine the journey she went on going through to make that book an actual.
I'm sorry.
You know, it's no, but doing the Lord's work, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because these have to be found out. These DIY churches don't work.
No,
they don't.
No.
And I hate to say it, with the growing increase not fervor, but the increased pursuit of Christianity throughout the globe, you're going to see a lot of this because there's going to be these people that just say, I was called to be a pastor. I'm going to start a church. And they start a church.
Jesus said it would happen.
And, you know, I was led this way. And it's like, maybe you were led that way, but maybe some other steps should have taken place before you got everybody under your responsibility. So with that being said, what do we got next week?
King Tut.
Yeah. Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
We're going to do the whole story of him. And then, of course, all the crazy stuff that happened since he passed. What a legendary story of a single human being, which at that time was considered godly. So, yeah, totally shifting gears.
Yeah.
Going in a different direction.
Yep.
And what do we got for rule number 1?
No Ouija boards.
Number 2.
No dolls.
3.
No capes.
4.
No blood rituals.
5.
No cults.
No cults, right?
Satanic or otherwise.
Yeah.
And please, if your pastor is telling you they have a direct line to God or Jesus,
run.
Please no.
Just run.
That's just not how it works.
Just go away.
Yes. Because even Jesus was like, hey, don't tell anybody what I just did.
Yeah. No, it's true. Number 6.
No apathy. You need to act to help enact a positive change in this world.
Yeah.
You know,
if somebody's getting beat up, don't pull out your camera just to get
just
it.
to take a picture, or just to take a video.
Actually use the phone part of the camera to call for help.
Yeah, try that.
Yeah, give that a shot.
You know, it's not just a recording device. Turns out it's also a phone.
Believe it or not, it was originally intended as a phone. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't even have to unlock it. You can just do 911.
Or you could just say 911, you know.
Even better.
Can't be freaking easier.
Doesn't get any easier.
Those rubberneckers. Number 8.
7. Don't engage with black-eyed entities.
That's right. Number 8.
Just listen.
Yeah, we've been doing that. Number 9.
No pedophiles.
Yeah. Don't do it.
Lucas and Christopher were not pedophiles.
No.
And if you read in the book,
that's the stuff
that was a big preoccupation with Tiffany. So, what's your problem?
Well, you know, again, a lot of stuff we had to leave out.
Yeah.
But last rule.
Return the shopping cart.
Yeah.
Do good deeds. Pay for the coffee of the person in front of you. Or if someone in front of you at the grocery store doesn't have enough to pay for their items or their cart isn't working and you can.
Yeah. Or just help somebody.
You know, help them out.
Yep. So, next week, King Tut. Till then, have an amazing day. A lovely week.
Freaking make choices.
Wow. Take care, folks.